Hello and welcome back, everybody. It is creepy, unexplained, and scary Sunday night. It's supposed to be Saturday, but I didn't make it. So, hello. And welcome, guys. Grab a seat, grab a blanket, grab a pillow, whatever you got to grab a hold of, grab it and get comfortable, please. And thank you. So, sorry I didn't make it in here last night for this. Of course, the grandkids and the realm of sleeping caught my attention and couldn't get out. Great video, great intro. Thank you to Molly, my videographer. She does such amazing things. The intro to the creepy stuff will scare you more than the actual. So, hope y'all's ready. This is, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of the town of Doveland. Now, there's more than one town. There's a town called Dublin, Wisconsin. There's a town called Ashley Falls, Kansas. There's quite a few of these towns that just poof, they no longer exist. How does that happen, you guys? Yes, thank you. Please check out our Molly's channel. She does some amazing things over there, guys. She's so super talented and she's very paranormal based. So if you like that paranormal stuff, guess what? You're going to find it. Very talented. So thank you again, Molly, for the stuff you do in the intros. You're amazing. God bless. Thank you, SRBBBB's in the house tonight. Good to see you, SRB. So yeah, like I said, normally Saturdays we do this, but didn't happen last night. So here we are tonight. I wanted to make up for it. Plus, I really enjoyed it. This one here really got my attention. It really floored me. And there's a few other things we're going to add into this tonight too. It's true, Molly. I got to give credit where credit's due, and you do amazing things. Well, you're going to blush then because I'm not going to stop talking about it because it's amazing stuff. And I really appreciate you, as do all of us in here, for the stuff you do. Do. That's why you hold that title that you hold, because I couldn't do this stuff without you. And all the videographer stuff that you do is great. So thank you. We love you. So who else do we got in here? Captain Jenks, good to see you tonight. Eddie's in the house for this one. Good. Miss Tandy, welcome back. Good to see you. SRBBBB. Of course, good golly, Miss Molly's in the house as well. Let me see here. Under and over it. Welcome back to you. Great to see you. Angel D. Great to have you here. Again, guys, for those you have not, please click that link right there. Jump on over, hit the notification bell, subscribe if you haven't, and like our stuff. It's all very likable. She's very talented. So please, if you haven't done it yet, please do it now. Only takes a second. We also got Gina Reed's in the house tonight. Good to see you, Gina. Siggy and Mike, always a pleasure to see you both. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Stormy Jane's back in the house. Welcome back. Thank you to all of my Blue Crew for being here. I should never try to do this without you. Thank you for being here. Mark Schumann, great to see you, my friend. Be Real, welcome back to you. Great to see you. 36 peeps in the house with 26 likes. We're almost there, y'all. Please hit that like button when you come through that door and share this out, if you will. Raquel, oh well, welcome back to you. Great to see you tonight. Let's see here. Just to give everybody that's newer here a little insight into what we do. Miss Jackie Young, welcome back. Great to see you tonight. So, with everything we do throughout the week, guys, it's very disheartening, very grueling, and it pulls on your heartstrings, and it makes you angry, and it gets you upset, and it's just bad stuff. So, what I've tried to do, oh yeah, Molly does a lot of the music. She writes songs and she just writes all the intro music for my channel as well. So yeah, I forgot about that too, guys. So sorry, Molly. There's paranormal stuff on her channel. She's got photographs of things that you wouldn't believe you're seeing, stuff like that. So she does great stuff. But she does really do some really great music, writing, lyrically and musically, puts that together. Like I said, she's done the intros for all my different segments of shows that I do. She does all the music, intro, outro, all of it. She does amazing. So, and, you know, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the Paranormal. It's very, very cool. 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 It's very, very cool Exactly, Cap. I was watching some UFO stuff, and history couldn't do it better than. Yeah, absolutely, sir. Absolutely. So anyway, back to what I was trying to explain to you guys. Come the weekend, I try to take a break from all the true crime and all that horrible stuff that we look at every day, and get a little bit of a decompression going on. And a lot of people like the paranormal, creepy, unexplained, scary stuff. So me too. I'm a huge fan of it. Always been a huge fan of it. So we started doing this a long time ago, and then I broke away. Then I came back. Then I broke away, and I came back. Mama Bear talked me into. It used to be Friday nights, Paranormal Fridays, but Mama Bear talked me into doing creepy, unexplained, and scary Saturday nights. So we do, and we go every direction you can think. It's not just hauntings or aliens. It's hauntings and aliens and ghosts and skinwalkers and werewolves and whatever you can think of that is unexplained, creepy, paranormal, whatever. We cover it and have, and will continue to do so. So I hope it is absolutely enjoyable for you. We do appreciate everybody that comes in here to support the channel in every fashion, guys. We don't ever expect anybody to donate to our channels to support them, but it is very much appreciated because it keeps me able to do stuff like this every single day to you guys. For you guys, it keeps some bills paid, all that fun stuff. Internet, all this stuff gets expensive, so that's why we run that stuff. For anybody that doesn't know that, yes, Dago has a creature in his backyard as well. One of these days, I'm gonna catch it on film and show it to you guys. So thank you to anybody that chooses to support our channel that way. You are all appreciated in that sense. Oh, Art Bell. Hey, hey, there you go, Miss Gina. That's awesome. Come on down, guys. Miss Tandy, great to see you tonight. I'm sure the tomboy's not in here, even though she was mad at me for not being here last night. Well, what my plan is, though, truly, maybe you guys can help me talk her into it, is to get Molly to join me for Creepy Unexplained and Scary Saturday nights up here as my co-host for those, because it's her forte. She's got a great voice. She's an awesome person. You don't have to see her, but her voice, you could hear her. She would join me. So if I can get all my peeps to talk her into joining me for these, it would be the icing on the cake. She's joined me before. It's no big deal. She's a little shy. So tonight we're going to be looking into the town of Dublin, Wisconsin, guys, that supposedly just disappeared. Or was it ever even there? I don't know. I never heard of it before this until I fell into this by accident. And Ashley, Kansas. Ashley Falls, Kansas. And there's many other towns that have been through this situation. There's a town that is no longer there that used to exist as a full-blown, hardworking, everyday, moving around town that no longer exists anymore because, welcome back, Scott, Metalhead, Skeptics. I love Skeptics, Scott. I'm a skeptic of everything. 100%, bro. Along the lines of Roanoke. Yep, that happened too. Another one we covered a while back. Also, Centralia, Pennsylvania is the town that the movie Silent Hill is based off of, or the video game too. It's a little different. That town had to be shut down and people moved out of it because it was on fire beneath the ground. Another story that we looked into. Hello, Wisconsin. There you go, Angel. Angel's in Australia and knows all this American stuff too. It's crazy. Um, he's lucky enough to get us in mod. That's true. That is true. Yeah, everybody knows what happened to that one, but it is quite interesting what happened in Centralia. It's pretty wild. Especially since there's people that I've gone there and you can no longer get into the town. You have to walk quite a ways to get in. They blocked it all off. Long time ago, friends and I went there. You could drive into the town at that point still too, but now they have roadblocks and little things up so you have to park outside and you have to walk all the way into town. And it's still steaming from underground, guys. It's been years now. And this building's still standing. Everything's still there. It's crazy. Silent Hill. And they're coming out with a second Silent Hill, too, by the way. What do you think, Molly? You want to join me tonight? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Stephanie Harlow, yes. It's good to see you tonight, SRBB. Thank you for joining us. '70s show. It's a great show. It played in the dark. So this town is quite interesting, and we're gonna look at a few different variations of stuff like this. I'm curious: is it a hoax? Is it a scary bedtime story, or did it really happen? Because I'm a skeptic like Scott. You guys know me that no, I don't. I was a ghost hunter, you guys. I had my own. My wife and I had our own ghost hunting group. Um, Trumbull researchers of the of apparitions and the paranormal for 10 years, 14 years. And I'm a skeptic with that too. Always have been, which is why we started the group with some friends. I don't believe that it exists unless you show it to me. Same with aliens and all that. You show it to me, we'll talk about it. Until I see it, nope. Yes, I am one of the founders of the Trumbull Researchers of Apparitions and Paranormal. Me and my wife and two other people. I have seen the Serpent Mounds, Gina. That is me hiding. Oh, I can still see you, Molly. You are a trip. Yes, you are. Eddie is a skeptic too. It's good to be a skeptic, guys, because people hoax this stuff so often that one of these days, you guys, one of our scary Saturday nights is going to be people. Uh-huh. 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 It's going to be, I'm going to open the phone lines up and have people call in to tell their stories and have people join us up here to tell us their stories of any interactions they ever had. I have something you'll like tonight, then, at least, if you like the Appalachian stories. Yeah, there's some crazy shit out there too, guys. So Mystic Butterfly, welcome to you. 43 peeps in the house. What is going on with this thing here? Get out of there. 31 likes. We're almost there. Come on in, guys. So yeah, we're gonna do that one night. Tell your story. If you had an experience, a story, or if you know somebody that had an experience or a story, we're gonna have you tell that. No, she doesn't have a show, Gina. She's a little too shy. She doesn't do all this stuff. Virginia Wolf, what's up? Good to see you. Maybe one of the nights we can talk about some of our interactions. She'll be able to join me. But we've been to Moundsville Reformatory, the Mansfield State Penitentiary. We've been to many different places and done our hunting. That smart ass patriot, where have you been? It's been a long time. I haven't seen you in a while. Welcome back. Great to see you tonight. The Appalachian stuff, you guys, yeah, I got a little treat for you to go along. Depending on how long it takes us to get through this, which it shouldn't. Some other stuff I have too that's really going to put you out there. Cat K, good to see you tonight. Thank you for joining us. Oh, don't be shy, guys. Listen, I was shy first 3 months that I was a creator, and I only talked. You didn't see my face. I know I'm ugly. I know I'm crazy looking. I don't care what anybody thinks of the way I look, and I got over it. And you know, all you do is look at me, so it's all good. Who cares what anybody thinks? You guys are all a beautiful people, every one of you, in every aspect. So that's what is the most important thing. There you go. I get it. 100% smartass. I absolutely get it. It's a rough go. It really is. You just yell at your screen. I understand, Raquel. I understand. Steven's in the house. Good to see you, brother. Angel, you're a trip. Angel of death. You're afraid of chat. Come on now. No, you're not. No, you're not. I will protect you all. This community is very uplifting, very comforting, very warm and loving. So nobody would ever make fun of anybody in here. We don't do that. And we support each other in every aspect in this amazing community. So if you're part of it, that's all that matters. That amen to that, Siggy. Beauty comes from within. Yes. As Mr. Marilyn Manson proclaims, the beautiful people, which you guys will hear from time to time when I do my music nights. I also do, for those of you that are newer, I do a music night, which I was thinking about doing tomorrow night. It's been a minute. I promised Miss Bonnie one of them. My son usually joins me for that. You hear him sing, and sometimes you get to hear me sing, and we'll sometimes pull up instruments and play. We kind of do little DJ thing. We take requests from people to play songs. It's a good old time, guys. So this is how we decompress over here at the True Crime Cafe, and it keeps our minds from imploding from all this true crime crap that we do. So yes, we do this all the time. And music is a savior, folks. I love my music. Music makes the world go round as far as I'm concerned. Thank you, smartass. We appreciate that. We both do. My son, you'll get to meet him. For those of you that haven't, he's my best friend as well. He's an amazing kid. He's ASD on the spectrum, chronic ADHD, so on and so forth. But you would never know it, guys. He's very high functioning. He's absolutely amazing. So, didn't say it right. The beautiful people. Banana. I got you. Banana, nana, nana, nana. I got you, Molly. Yes, I played in multiple bands, you guys. I'm a musician. My son is a musician. And everything in life is surrounded by music as far as we're concerned. And that is a good way for us to just break away, smile again, let all that stress go. And I go from one end of the spectrum to the other. I'll play anything from Slipknot to good God, Frank Sinatra. Whatever it is, I'll play it. I don't care. And we do that in here in our music nights. So thank you, SRB. It's a lot of fun. I like to kick back into the 90s, the 80s, the 70s. Wherever we go, we go. And I got a huge playlist. I used to be a DJ a long time ago, and I have all sorts of stuff. And I know which way to go, when to go, and how to do it. Some of the stuff I can't play because certain reasons, but I'm surprised Rose didn't come in here tonight. Let me see here. Oh yeah, Gina from Des Moines. And that's okay, Tandy. You don't have to be. We can listen. We listen to one song from one group and one song from another. The first song I always usually play is September by Earth, Wind, and Fire because it's my mom's favorite song and one of mine. And then I can go anywhere from that to the Des Moines, Iowa, or the Iowa album from Slipknot. Sorry, you got me saying it now, Gina. Um, yes, yes. Miss Kiki's awesome. He wanted to do it tonight, but he's upstairs in his room singing some what's his name songs right now. I can hear him. What's his name? That big dude, a country singer, but he's really not country. Can't think of his name. Jelly Roll. There we go. Oh, same here, Scott. It's like my favorite group right now. Has been for a long time. He will, Molly. Don't worry. You got to be here for it, though. You got to be here for it. Yeah, I heard he puts on a great show. Absolutely. So, how many people in here? Nancy Griffith, Folk Country. I've heard the name, Eddie. I don't know if I've heard any of her music, but I've heard the name. Vermilion, yes. Wait and Bleed is one of my favorite songs by them. Because I like the music accompaniment. I can't say it. Accompaniment. There we go. Cheap Trick is awesome. Heart is amazing. Heart is amazing. I have to do what, Molly? You have to do it. Tomorrow night we're gonna do it, Molly. Heart is just amazing. I love Heart. Always have. Slayer. Yeah, all their songs are amazing. I'm a huge Slipknot fan. Slayer is probably my favorite band of all time. Of course, Metallica, Megadeth. Um, Metallica's gone so commercialized, though. I don't get into my favorite bands and chats. Molly listens to different stuff than some other peeps, but it's really good music. We go all over the place. Billy Joel, Elton John, Slipknot, Kiss. There's certain bands I can't play because you just can't. So I agree. My favorite are the big four: Slayer, Metallica, Megadeth, and Anthrax, probably. And I've never been a big fan of Anthrax, but Slipknot took the Anthrax's place, as far as I'm concerned. In that big four, they're actually number one for me. Well, right now, Slayer and Slipknot are my two faves, and they're really heavy, but I love them. Of course, Zeppelin is awesome. That's awesome. I've seen quite a few concerts in my life too. You guys will be surprised that don't familiar with me yet, because I can throw in a boy band song and sing to you. 'Cause I used to do that back in the day too. I was in a couple music groups, dance and singing groups. Me either, Scott. I liked like two songs by them, and I don't like. I never liked Charlie. Joey Belladonna was about my only, and Scott Ian, but Scott Ian got on my nerves too. So, yeah. I don't know if Brandy's in here, but we'll handle it. We'll get you in there, Raquel. Let me see here. All right. We got 41 peeps in the house tonight, 37 likes. We're getting there. Thank you guys for that. Let's see what I can find, Foja. Kick this off, get started, and back up into where I want to be. So let's see here. Who in here? Welcome, Miss Paula. Out of the 43 people that are in here, who in here enjoys paranormal, creepy, unexplained stuff? I want to know. Put a one in the chat if you do, please. Yeah. Guar. I've seen Guar in concert. See Tiris. Hello. Welcome to you. Jackie Young's in the house. Wow, looks like all you guys are hitting one for that. Toby, that's sad, smartass. I miss Toby Keith. He was amazing. Crafty Mama, welcome. Well, if you don't like the paranormal, creepy, unexplained, you can put it too. But that's easier for you, Angel. I just figured if you didn't put a one, you didn't like it. And so far, it looks like everybody's doing it. So there's a lot of fans of it in here. That's good. Stevie Ray, hey, hey. Patriot. I'll try to call her Patriot. I used to hate saying it because of her name. I love her name, though. Who's Sass and Dago? Smart ass. I know, Angel. You're good. I know you always got something you got to put in there. Stevie Ray is the shit. I have a buddy of mine that's in the music industry that does a Stevie Ray tribute. He's a real good friend of mine. I grew up with and went to school with. He's really good too. I might have to show you guys one time. A third option, huh? Do you like paranormal, unexplained, and creepy stuff, or you don't like it? What would be the third option? I like cartoons. Are you like cartoons? If you don't like cartoons, what the hell's wrong with you? Come on now. You're one of the few men creators with the meatballs to say my name. Oh, hell. Smart ass patriot. Why would anybody be afraid to say it? If they're not, they need to grow up. We're big boys. Yes, he is. He was my first crush. I was so young and used to watch VHS tapes my dad had been playing. Wow. That's awesome. Stevie Ray is the shit. Death Valleys, Sailing Stones that move. I have heard that before. I have heard that story, Eddie. That's interesting. That is interesting. That's a good point. We might have to look into that, Eddie. Sailing Stones. Yeah, there's some crazy shit that goes on. There's a whole thing um about there being a lost city or a buried city underneath um the Grand Canyon that I looked into one time out of accident. Really cool stuff, guys. There's so much stuff out there to look into. If you're into that stuff, there's so much to look into. Thanks for throwing that out there, Daddy. That's a good point to look into. The smart ass Patriots in the house tonight. We've missed you, by the way. And you're white again. We got to get you green again. Got to get you green again. I've heard that too, Patriot. Definitely. Ancient city at the bottom of Lake Mead. Yes, I've heard that. There's rainforest fossils under Antarctica. I've heard all those things. I've heard of all this stuff. I looked at this stuff too, you guys. There's so much wild stuff out there that it makes it really hard to believe because, well, especially if you're like me and you're a skeptic about everything. Unless you show it to me, it didn't happen. So, yes, it's been wonderful. It's wonderful to see you back. We have missed you for sure. Truth Seeker, what's up? Okay. Let's see here. Which one do I want to go into first for you guys? I have a couple actually. I have Round Valley, I have Ashley Falls, and I have Doveland, Wisconsin. I think the Dublin one, I have somebody to tell the story as well. Hold on here. Hang on. The way this guy tells the story is kind of animated too, so I thought you guys might enjoy it. He's pretty cool. Okay. Give me one moment here. All right, hold on. Let me get this set up. All right. Let's get this up and moving. I can get my computer to cooperate. Yes, we are a drama-free community. That is a fact. Thank you, Miss Tandy. We try our best to keep it that way. Under right back at you. This was always my comfy place, but the kid stuff got to be too much for a while the drama, but it isn't here, it appears. Thank goodness. No. No, no, no. We keep it out of here. Exactly. Satirius, yes. All right. Give me 1 minute. Here we go.
Take a look at this photograph. It seems pretty normal, right? 3 friends enjoying a fondue dinner, something you might find in any number of towns across the world. But folks, looks can be deceiving. What if I told you that these people never existed? That the restaurant never existed? Despite the fact that hundreds of people remember it, the town where the picture was taken never existed. Well, one day, people were visiting, driving past it, remembering it as part of their family history, and the next, gone, can't be found, no record anywhere. In any archives or anywhere online, an entire town and every life in it erased without a trace. And what if I told you that this is only one of several towns scattered across the globe that have vanished overnight? You won't want to miss.
Now, I'm going to tell you guys, for anybody that likes crazy stuff, weird stuff like this, click on that link I threw up there. The channel's called What Lurks Beneath. He has provided this footage tonight. He does some amazing stuff, guys. I love what he does. Go check him out. Hit the like button, subscribe. Tell him I sent you. I don't care. Whatever it is. But please, please, go check this guy out. You won't be disappointed if you like this stuff at all. No worries, smartass. You're always a member here. You're always family here. You always have been. So you do what you do when you feel like doing it. No worries. Come on, blow that up for me. There we go. Here we go.
This one. What would you do if you had memories of a place that never existed? Would you think you had gone crazy, or would you be convinced that you were right and the rest of the world was wrong? For decades, many people throughout the Midwest knew about a small town in northwestern Wisconsin called Doveland. According to what people remember, it was indistinguishable from thousands of other towns scattered across America. People remembered it being referenced around the dinner table at night. Some people even traced their family roots back to this town, or remember sipping coffee out of a mug with the name of the town written across the side. But here's the thing. It doesn't seem like Doveland ever existed. Ever. Despite all of the memories that people have had of this place, there is no historical record for a town that goes by this name in Wisconsin. But for those who do remember Doveland, that doesn't convince them. Sometime after the year 2000, people began going online, looking for more information about the town that didn't exist. Some were encouraged after they headed to Google and began typing in the search bar, only to see the recommended search results suggest plain as day, Doveland, Wisconsin. Other people searching for the town misspelled it, only to have Google autocorrect the name to Doveland. Yet, despite this intriguing ghost trace of Doveland online, the results always turned up nothing. Faced with this, people naturally started heading to internet message boards where they shared their vague memories of the town. One commenter claimed that, "I grew up around Rhinelander, and I distinctly remember my dad wearing a t-shirt from a bar that said Beren's Pub, Doveland." Another chimed in to say that their family also remembered a Wisconsin town by that name. And they wrote that the freaky bit is how many people in my family from Wisconsin say they remember Doveland. Time and time again, the things that you hear are really consistent. Doveland was real. I went there, my family lived there, etc. But there just isn't any evidence for its existence. apart from people's memories and the photograph that I showed you at the start of this video. To this date, although some people claim to know who they are, none of the individuals in the picture at the dinner table have been successfully identified. But that hasn't stopped people from trying to get to the bottom of the mystery. In fact, some people determined to figure out what happened to the town that disappeared have gone to great lengths. Their search began online and ended in Wisconsin archives, but each search yields the same results. No town by that name, no map with it listed, and no indication that Doveland was ever renamed or rezoned. But if it's...
I don't know, Eddie. I haven't actually tried to do that, but the way he explains it is that it recorrects and redirects you in different places. I don't know. You could try it out and see what happens. He could be wrong. I don't know. It doesn't give like direct map locations and stuff. It's a little strange.
It's a hoax. Where did it come from? And why do so many people seem to remember a town by that name? It just simply doesn't make any sense. And here's another interesting detail. Remember how I said that there are some big online search engines and they retain a ghost trace of Doveland in the form of an autocorrect and search suggestions? Well, Google does something else strange when you type in Doveland, or at least it did until the urban legend gained more steam. For a while, when you typed Doveland into the search bar, one of the first results would be this article about missing people in Wisconsin. The news story from Appleton, Wisconsin's Post-Crescent newspaper features in-depth coverage of the open missing persons cases in the state. And as of 2015, more than 1,000 Wisconsinites had vanished without a trace. Are the Google results trying to tell us something? Did some of these people disappear when Doveland was wiped off the map? Honestly, it's all kind of frustrating because the story is just so intriguing. So what do we know for sure about this place? Well, very little. Unfortunately, if there's any consistent narrative to the story, it goes something like this: that Doveland was situated somewhere in Wisconsin. It was there for decades until it vanished in the 1990s. As to how or why this happened, it's really anyone's guess. I mean, some people think that a dam broke and wiped out the entire town. Over 900 dams have been built in the state of Wisconsin, and some certainly fail from time to time. In fact, the tiny logging town of Warner, Wisconsin, was evacuated and deliberately destroyed after the construction of a dam. But there's no record of that happening to any town named Doveland. Others believe that an earthquake opened up a sinkhole, causing the entire town to be swallowed into the earth, and that, folks, is truly what lurks beneath. All without a trace, but compared to other states, Wisconsin doesn't have a ton of earthquake activity. In fact, one survey listed Wisconsin as 49 on the U.S. Earthquake Index state rank. Another popular theory holds that Doveland was the local name of a small, unincorporated community. As financial realities changed throughout Wisconsin, Doveland simply fell on hard times and everybody left, leaving the town to collapse and its buildings to crumble. If only Doveland would have had the help of today's sponsor, PDS Debt. You see, they specialize in offering customized options for anyone struggling with debt, like credit cards. Besides the possibility of an outright hoax, the simplest explanation is that the was to probably still exist, and I'd have saved a lot more money. So stop waiting and start saving. Get a free debt analysis right now at pdsdebt.com/lurks. It only takes 30 seconds. That's pdsdebt.com/lurks. And none of these feel right. Even if a dam, an earthquake, or economic turmoil was to blame, none of these explanations can really answer why Doveland was effectively scrubbed from all historical record. I mean, even if Doveland was wiped out by a catastrophe, something indicating its existence should exist somewhere.
Yes, Josh Gates is my absolute favorite explorer. I love everything he's ever put out, every show he's ever been on. He's amazing.
So where did this story even come from? Well, besides the possibility of an outright hoax, the simplest explanation is that the town was never there to begin with. Lots of debunkers think that people, children growing up in the 1990s especially, simply misheard the name of another Wisconsin town that does exist. That community is Delavan, located in Walworth County. And that seems likely enough, right? At least in some circumstances, but other people insist that they knew about Delavan and Doveland, and that they were two separate places. This conflicting history has led a lot of wild speculation. Faced with a lack of concrete clues, people who remember Doveland are left to indulge in some pretty wild theories. Some people think that the Doveland disappearance is a result of the Mandela effect. Others think that maybe we slipped into an alternate dimension and that, in some other reality, Doveland is still alive and well in an alternate version of Wisconsin.
I just learned of all the noise surrounding Dublin, and I think I could add some insight. Dublin was a small town in Wisconsin that housed a lot of military families. My father lived there for a year or two and spoke of it occasionally. The main thing I remember is that it had to do with Project Sanguine in the early 60s. I don't think it was X-Files type stuff, but the town was destroyed after an incident. I thought they were digging up a ton of land or something and they flooded the town or something. But this is a rehashed secondhand memory from years ago.
Another poster online also hinted at this mysterious government project. They said,
Dublin was very real. My father used to mention it occasionally before he passed. And the only reason I remember it is because I found it ironic that a town named Dublin was populated by almost exclusively military personnel and their families. I'll dig around for a shirt one back home next in early September. If I remember correctly, Dublin was built as part of Project Sanguine in the mid to late 60s. But everyone left when the project was canceled. But I thought something went very wrong. You could only dig up that much turf for so long before you're bound to have problems.
Now listen, I know what you're asking because I asked the same question. What's Project Sanguine? Well, here's where it gets even more interesting because while people disagree on whether or not Doveland ever existed, Project Sanguine is a matter of historical record. As it turns out, it was first proposed by the United States Navy in 1968 during the Cold War. At the time, submerged vessels had no way of effectively communicating whenever they were in deep water. The goal was to use extremely low-frequency radio waves, or ELF waves, to communicate with these submarines underwater, no matter where they were on Earth. And the spot that they picked to construct the project was none other than Wisconsin. Now, initial plans were impractical. In fact, it was originally so large that the antennae alone would have had to use 6,000 miles of buried cables covering 2/5 of the entire state of Wisconsin. But because of the absurdity of this proposal, the project was scaled down and rebranded in 1969 as Project ELF, named for the extremely low frequency radio waves that I mentioned earlier. In the end, 2 transmitter facilities were built for Project ELF, one in Republic, Michigan, and one at Clam Lake, Wisconsin. Now, testing for the operation began in 1982, and it became officially operational 7 years later. Now, the Navy wasn't especially pleased with the results. While the radio waves enabled communication with submerged vessels halfway across the...
Hey, Miss Joanne's in the house. Welcome, everybody, for joining us. Thank you for being here tonight. I hope you guys, this gets better. I promise you. I hope you guys are into this.
Planet, the antenna was still vulnerable to nuclear attack. To make matters worse for the military, the project proved highly controversial to residents of the upper Midwest, who wanted nothing to do with the operation. And in 2004, the Navy shut down both the transmitter in Wisconsin and the transmitter in Michigan. And by that point, ELF waves were made redundant by advancements in the field of VLF, or very low frequency communication systems. According to those who hold the Project Sanguine theory, Dublin, Wisconsin was built specifically to house personnel working on the operation. And when the project was abandoned, so was the town. A more sinister possibility is that a side effect of Project Sanguine wiped Dublin out of existence. According to this theory, the lack of historical records regarding this town are the result of really one of two possibilities. Either a government cover-up to hide the casualties from their experiments, because they've never done something like that before, right? Or more bizarrely, Project Sanguine somehow altered reality as we know it, wiping Doveland from the earth and the history books, but not from people's memory. Unfortunately, we'll never know the truth behind Doveland. Maybe it really is just a hoax. I mean, after all, the internet is filled with similar claims, some of which are even flimsier than the Doveland story. Take, for example, the town of Langville, Montana. And if you look online, you won't find much about it, because everything about Langville boils down to a rumor of a rumor of a rumor. But there's nothing else to learn about beyond that. At least Doveland has an interesting connection with Project Sanguine. Now, another disappearing town gives us a little more to go on. In 2015, Colin Hudson at the website Strange State shared an email that his mother had recently received. It described another town that seemed to have disappeared overnight, the community of Urkhammer, Iowa. Supposedly, in the early 20th century, Urkhammer was a small, unremarkable town lurking off of Route 41. According to the stories, around 1928, Urkhammer basically just faded out of existence. Colin wrote this.
Aerial photographs showed only empty fields where there should have been homes and streets and stores surrounded by farms and waving fields of grain. A week or so later, a lost tourist had his Marmaxlister topped off with gasoline at the Urkhammer Esso station. Then, 2 miles beyond the town's borders, discovered that his tank was empty. He walked back to the mandate refund from the conniving general store and gas pump before him, only to discover that regardless of how far he walked, the town remained the same distance ahead of him. Fortunately, another motorist picked him up after an hour or two and replenished his car's fuel supply. But the man had been shaken to the core and required a prolonged sojourn in an alpine sanitarium.
Now, according to the story, Urkhammer became more and more insubstantial as the years passed. People visiting town allegedly said that their hands and feet passed through buildings like they were smoke. And on May 7th, 1932, a local farmer passed by Urkhammer and the town finally vanished for good. Strange, isn't it? Now, even though Colin Hudson was quite transparent about his suspicions that the Urkhammer narrative was nothing more than a simple, silly tall tale, the story nonetheless gained some traction on the internet. Today, it straddles the murky line between fact and fiction. If nothing else, it makes for an enjoyable tall tale. I mean, look, even if Doveland, Langville, and Urkhammer are hoaxes, there are other examples throughout history where towns were either suddenly abandoned or vanished completely. These stories stretch back into antiquity. For example, Celtic folklore holds that some islands, including the mythical High Brazil, were always invisible except for one day every 7 years. In the historical record, there's the famous example of the Roanoke colony, where an entire community of nearly 120 English settlers disappeared from the North Carolina coast in 1590. Now, history also tells us about the chilling story of Lake Anjukuni, a village in Nunavut, Canada. As the story goes, it was a cold day in November of 1930, and a fur trapper named Joe LaBelle was looking for shelter. And as he's gathering what he's collecting from his traps, he remembers that there's a well-established Inuit settlement of at least 30 people on the shores of a nearby body of water, Anjukuni Lake. Well, Joe packs up his belongings and starts making his way to the Inuit community. But as he does this, he notices something odd. All the buildings are there, but there's absolutely no sign of life. Yeah, it's cold outside, but the people in the village are Inuit. This is the climate that they're used to. There should be somebody outside, but there's nobody. There aren't even any dogs that run up to meet him like they usually do. And so he enters the first building that is open, and while he's glad to get out of the cold, what he sees somehow chills him to the bone, because the home is completely vacant, and it looks like everyone just up and left at a moment's notice. And as he goes around and tours each of the buildings in the village, he notices the same thing over and over again. I mean, there are meals that are sitting half eaten. Fires are still going, some with food still cooking over them. Completely abandoned huts are well stocked with food and provisions. Some clothing sat half mended, the needles dropped to the ground. But there are no signs of a struggle, no signs of violence. Everybody is just gone. And worst of all, Joe discovers the reason why there weren't any dogs there to greet him. All 7 of the community sled dogs had all starved to death, tied up where they had been abandoned. But even after discovering the dead dogs, Joe has to reconsider whether or not this is the worst thing. I mean, maybe it's not. Maybe the worst thing is the fact that despite all signs that everybody had fled the village in an instant, all the snow in the village is absolutely pristine. There are no tracks to be found going to or from the buildings anywhere in the village. Well, Joe starts making his own tracks, if you take my meaning. He heads straight out of the Lake Anjukuni village to the nearest settlement and alerts authorities. On the way out of town, he happens upon another gruesome discovery. A human grave on the outskirts of the community has been dug up, and it clearly wasn't done by an animal. It was done by something with hands. Now, needless to say, Joe heads straight to the authorities when he reaches civilization, and there he tells the Royal Canadian Mounted Police all that he's seen. Well, they immediately follow him back to Lake Anjukuni village, and when they see the empty town, they are just as perplexed as Joe and promptly launch an investigation. And the results of this are conflicting because people have added to and embellished the story over the years. I mean, some people say that the RCMP discovered every grave around the settlement exhumed, the headstones stacked in piles along each hole in the earth. You know, there's another retelling that claims that 3 trappers, Armand Laurent and his 2 sons, were questioned and told an unsettling story about an immense aerial cylindrical object flying through the sky. The object transformed into the shape of a bullet in mid-flight and headed in the direction of Lake Anjukuni village. There were also claims that the investigators sometimes saw strange lights pulsing in the sky above the settlement, although this could have easily just been the aurora borealis. Supposedly, the RCMP determined that the Inuit citizens had abandoned the village 8 weeks earlier, a detail that, like a lot of the story, doesn't quite line up with the state that Joe LaBelle found the village in. I mean, if it had been abandoned for 8 weeks, then how was their food cooking over a fire? And how were their fires going? I mean, come on. Now, over time, many have come to regard the Lake Anjukuni village story to simply be a hoax, or at least to be so polluted by rumors that there's no way of determining the actual truth. This seems to be backed up by RCMP historian S.W. Horall, who in 1988 wrote,
"Many years ago, the members of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, then retired, who had served in the area at the time these events were purported to have happened, 1930, were asked for their comments on the story. They could not confirm it, recalled nothing like it, and were astounded that such a ridiculous tale could be believed. Our files were carefully searched. No strange craft was ever reported. No one named Joe LaBelle ever came to the RCMP in panic about Lake Anjukuni. The RMCP did not send out any search parties. The only records we have on the story are copies of letters to correspondents like yourself, informing the writers that the story is entirely fictitious."
But consider this. Joe LaBelle was a real person, a fur trapper who usually worked in Manitoba. No one disagrees on that point. And if he indeed ran across the abandoned village, he most likely took the secret to his grave. Now, each day, the residents of a small village in the heart of a Brazilian rainforest received a shipment of trade supplies from a neighboring community known as Hoer Verde. But on the morning of February 5th, 1923, something happened. Or rather, something didn't happen. Everyone waited on the dock in the river for the boat from Hoer Verde to arrive, and it never came. Right away, everyone realized that this was highly unusual. Had something happened on the river? Had the boat capsized? The villagers needed the supplies, so instead of waiting for an answer, they decided to go downriver themselves in the hope of reestablishing contact. the first thing they were looking for was any sign of the boat. And they found it. It was still tied to the dock at Hoer Verde, and there was no one at the dock to greet them. In fact, there didn't seem to be anyone anywhere. Hoer Verde, a community of 600 people, seemed entirely abandoned. And by now, the other villagers are on high alert. They're wondering what is wrong. So they dock their own boat and disembark. Slowly and carefully, the visitors make their way through the empty streets, and for a while, the only sound that they hear is the creaking of signs in the wind. When they eventually gather the courage to enter some of the homes, what they find is very reminiscent of what happened at Lake Anjukuni. Doors and windows sit open, tables are set for dinner, but all the plates still have food. Personal items have been left behind, and as in Canada, there is no sign of violence or struggle. Everybody is gone. Eventually, the visiting villages decide that they can't go on any further. They send help from the nearest town, and after waiting for a while, authorities arrive. And what they discover is easily the most disturbing part. It began with a pistol, and it sat in the dirt unattended, but the smell of gunpowder lingers in the air. It has recently been shot. The pistol is collected as evidence in the hope that a forensic team might be able to shed light on what went down in this abandoned town. Well, the authorities continue their investigation, and after conducting a thorough search of Hoer Verde, one building remains, the schoolhouse. So the investigators slowly enter the building, and they call out to see if anyone is still inside. Maybe there's a child hiding somewhere. One old enough to help them understand what happened. But everywhere they look, they find this schoolhouse as abandoned as the rest of the village. Like every other building, it seems as if everyone just up and left in the blink of an eye. Now, from the front of the classroom, one of the investigators shouts, "They found something." The others draw closer. The person at the front of the room is pointing at the blackboard, and there, written in chalk, is a simple phrase in Portuguese: "There is no salvation." Like the Lake Anjukuni village story, the tale of Hoer Verde is shrouded in mystery. No one knows for certain if it's true, or even if it is, how true all of the details are. It's a bit like Doveland in a way. If the story of the disappearance of Hoer Verde is as presented, and look, who knows, then there are a variety of possible explanations. I mean, the wilder ones claim that the townspeople were sucked into a black hole that somehow materialized in the Brazilian rainforest. Not only is this hard to prove, but you think that something like a singularity would have damaged the buildings, if not swallowed the entire planet. Of course, there's always the alien angle, but this is even flimsier than the Lake Anjukuni village story, because at least there was someone who supposedly saw a UFO in that account. There's no indication of that anywhere in Hoer Verde. One of the most plausible theories draws upon the geopolitical issues in Brazil at the time. Artur da Silva Bernardes had just been elected Brazil's 12th president the year before, and came into office amidst a sea of political turmoil. Changes in the government had spawned guerrilla activity in the jungle, and it seems just as likely that Hoer Verde, if the town ever existed at all, fell prey to the guerrillas or bandits. I like to think that if this theory is accurate, the citizens of Hoer Verde weren't taken hostage or killed. I like to think that what everyone saw on February 5th, 1923 was simply the aftermath of a successful evacuation of the town, and that these citizens went somewhere else to live long, happy lives. Now, the last town we're going to talk about today is known as Ashley in Kansas. As the story goes, Ashley was a small farming town of no more than 700 people. If this wasn't a town where everybody knew everybody, then I don't know what was. But on August 16th, 1952, it was hit by an earthquake that registered a whopping 7.9 on the Richter scale. Since the community was so tiny, word about the devastation that the town faced took a long time to reach anywhere else in the state. And by the time help arrived, well, it was too late. Now, here's where it gets really wild. rescuers arrived to find the area around Ashley completely devoid of any signs of life. There were no people, pets, or even wildlife. Things only got worse when they entered town. As the story goes, the center of Ashley had been reduced to a smoking, flaming pit, measuring 500 yards wide and 1,000 yards long. Around the edge of this fissure, rescuers tried to find survivors, but as in every other story, there was no one to be found. After 12 days, the search was called off. The assumption was that anyone who hadn't fallen to the depths of the earth had left town a long time ago. When a second rescue party reached Ashley later, they were amazed to find the pit at the center of town completely resealed. The going theory was that aftershocks from the initial earthquake had forced the fissure closed. Now, researcher and writer Brent Swanser had this to say about what happened next.
Taking things deeper into the bizarre, further investigation would supposedly turn up a variety of strange phenomena that had plagued the area before everyone had seemingly disappeared. Allegedly, on August 8, there was a report coming from a local by the name of Gabriel Jonathan, who claimed that he had seen a small black opening in the sky. And not long after that, police were deluged with calls reporting the same exact thing. The following morning, a police officer from the nearby town of Hayes by the name of Alan Mace was sent in to investigate, after which he would radio in to claim that he had been headed down the only road towards Ashley, but had somehow found himself back into town of Hayes. Despite the fact that he had not turned around, he had apparently been rerouted by some mysterious force.
According to the story, and look, folks, I'm not saying that I believe this, other officers dispatched to the area reported the exact same thing happened to them. And there were other claims too. In the days before the quake, the skies turned black at midday. Strange red and orange flames shot through the clouds above town. People vanished without a trace. Citizens claimed visitations and full-blown conversations with their deceased loved ones. In one terrifying example, a woman by the name of Phoebe Danielski claimed that her daughter said she had talked to her father, who had been dead and in the ground for 3 years at that point. Phoebe's daughter kept making references to trying to go outside to join them. It's a truly disturbing story, but like everything we've talked about today, remains wholly inconclusive. Summarizing the story of Ashley, Kansas, Brent wrote this.
It certainly does not help that no such record of such a large earthquake can be found anywhere in the history of the state of Kansas, nor any news stories on the matter in Hayes newspaper archives. But when has this ever stopped a good conspiracy theory? There are those who maintain that the event was merely covered up, and that this is why it does not appear in public records. But there is no way to really know if the town of Ashley, Kansas really did vanish or not, or if it even ever existed at all, and it remains a creepy yet unverified, almost certainly fictional story that is nevertheless just believable enough to create an air of believability, and has thus generated a fair bit of discussion.
So, what do you think? Can entire towns just vanish overnight? If so, why aren't there any records? Is it because we've slipped into an alternate dimension, or because of a government cover-up? I mean, I want to know what you think. And because all of you watching this episode have reached this far, I want you to comment below, won't you take me to Funky Town? So that way I know who made it to the end of the video and who didn't. And if you want to see more content just like this, where we dive into strange cases of the mysterious and supernatural, then what are you waiting for? Smack that like and subscribe button right now. Do it. I dare you, for more content just like this from yours truly. And never forget, I love you all. Keep an open mind, and I'll see you all in the very next episode.
Wow. What do you guys think about that one? That's just one of them. And they kind of combined a few of them together, but it's kind of interesting to me. Did these towns exist before? Are they... Is it just a figment of somebody's imagination, or what's the damn deal? It's pretty wild, in my opinion. So, onward we go. Strange for sure, Bonnie. Very strange. Let's see what we got coming here. I was going to show you. Hang on. One minute. It's loading really slow. Sorry, guys. Okay. Now this is about Round Valley. Okay, this is maybe not as mysterious. Depends on how you take it. I think it is, including the lake around it. It's wild, folks. So I think so. We'll see.
On that unusually warm day in 1959, Emma Haver stared at her house, high off its foundation, on the back of a truck.
The day the man came and knocked on the door, and he said, I came to appraise your property for the state. I said, we don't want to sell. He said, you have no choice.
It was hot enough, she remembered, that the soil underneath dried out to a fine powdered sand.
It was such a traumatic experience for all of us that loved the valley. Families broken up.
3 generations of Havers watched their house trek out of the valley to rest on a road so new it hadn't even been given a name yet.
We had so many tears. It just seemed like the more we fought it, the worse it became.
They had to get out of the valley before the state flooded it and washed her small town from the map forever.
I wish I could make people, I wish they could see what had happened there. It was such a traumatic experience for all of us that loved the valley.
Now, this is based off of a story that was known to happen, but the creepy thing about this is it wasn't known. It was known to the people that lived here, and it was known to the government. But nobody else really knew about it. Nobody did for a long, long time, from my understanding, the way I read this. So it's not as weird as in poof, it vanished, but there's some strange things that are attributed to this and this body of water as well that I read about in an article. And it's still very interesting at the very least. So I figured it would be a good accompaniment to go along with it.
People once lived there. They don't know that. They think it's a place to go and run their boats and swim and so on. People lived there. People loved there.
On most mornings, the reservoir at Round Valley, New Jersey is frigid and clear. Legend claims that on calm days you can see the tops of the farmhouses submerged beneath it.
Round Valley is called the Bermuda Triangle of New Jersey. People are seeing things in the water. 18th, 19th century buildings.
Eddie, I swear to God, I love you to death, brother, but don't you dare go there. Don't you dare go there. My God, no.
Round Valley Reservoir flooded a valley where people lived. There was a town there. There is a town there. There's some kernel of truth to what people believe.
In Round Valley, now a state park, Indians and farmers alike sustained themselves for generations on the land, cloistered from the outside world.
Now, the park is a bit of wilderness in a pretty busy part of New Jersey. The reservoir occupies close to 2,400 acres, and the parkland of about close to 1,300 acres surrounds that. It's passive recreation. It's basically wilderness.
They say the soil in that valley could grow anything. And for a time before the waters, maybe it did. Raw earth, black earth, good earth. Round Valley takes its name from its natural bowl shape, easily defensible from outsiders with only one entrance. The first human inhabitants of the empty valley were the Lenape, the original people.
The Indians, of course, never had a written language. They had a storytelling language. And so what really has come down to us is not only their stories, but archaeological digs have shown us where they lived, how they lived. Everything came to them from the Great Spirit. And subsequently, if they took something from the earth, they put it back. They were always near water because water is life itself.
These Algonquin speakers lived communally, cultivating maize, beans, and squash along the creek that bisected the valley. They buried their chiefs high in the hills to watch over the living.
The early English colonists were concerned with several things. The New World represented a place where they could start over, where they could build what they termed a city on the hill.
Agreed, Scott.
Economic opportunity was at or near the top of their list.
Every square inch of Europe was owned by somebody. If you were a peasant, you didn't own anything. You worked for somebody else.
They'd been there for thousands of years, but in less than a century, the Lenape were gone from the valley, forced ever westward by expansionism, selling their land and intermarrying with other tribes and whites until their footprint had all but disappeared.
The Native Americans sold their land. Nothing in New Jersey was taken.
Just as the Lenape had tended the land for millennia, so too would the Dutch, English, and later German settlers who trafficked in the golden currency of the New World, land.
Now, I have one about the lake that goes with this. That's why I'm showing you this one first, guys. And it's kind of that's the creepier one, but this explains it. So
they brought with them land husbandry traditions of the old country, their religious practices, along with names like Voorhees, Welsh, Kenny, Huffman, and Haver.
We moved to Round Valley when I was about 15. Those were the happiest days of my lives, when I finally had a room away from my brothers. I had a very close relationship with my dad. I loved him very much. My family's home was like an anchor. We had such good times in that home. They grew everything there. I mean, we even had strawberries. We never went hungry.
Like the Indians before them, residents continued farming, finding the soil rich and giving.
Most of the people that were in Round Valley were farmers and had been farmers for many years. They were really dedicated to their farm and their animals.
Along the densely populated East Coast, an unprecedented shift from rural to urban living was already well underway.
have a good night,
New
Scott.
York
Thank you for
City's
joining us.
population increased by nearly half between 1890 and 1900, then half again in the next decade alone.
In 1800, approximately 94% of Americans lived in what we would today define as a rural setting. Today, that number is under 20%. So in the course of a little over 200 years, we've completely inverted where we are as urban and rural population.
Within sight across the Hudson River, Newark, New Jersey, a hub for rail transportation and industry in the state. Newark was booming.
The emergence of the American Railroad network greatly helped outmigration from rural areas into cities. People could hop on a train and be in another city in a matter of days. In our own eyes, we were becoming something much greater than we had been.
Industrialization challenged accepted practices of manufacturing and farming. Automobiles were becoming ever more commonplace. But in the valley, life for this agrarian society remained largely undisturbed. A slight one-road town, 24 farms, 26 houses, and Valley Road bisecting the valley, it barely registered on the map.
In old deeds, it's referred to as the hole. People tended to not embellish so much as they saw it. They said, oh, that's a hole.
Children worked the land as soon as they were old enough to handle a tool. One resident wrote of taking long, cool summer baths on the lawn in a tin tub, beyond the reach of indoor plumbing. Electricity didn't arrive until the 1940s.
It was a safe place. If you need help, the other farmers are there immediately.
For generations, they tended the crops and intermarried. No one bothered to lock their doors at night.
When one farmer would be bringing in crops, the other farmers would help. It would remind me very much of real olden times when people worked together to bring in crops.
Prone to extreme drought and flood cycles across New Jersey, even the fertile valley could be a difficult place to farm from year to year. A shortage of rain meant lower crop yields and livestock famine. First, a depression in 1929, then a 3-year drought, recorded as the second worst in state history, drained water reserves and withered crops, punishing New Jersey, New York, and much of the Northeast.
In a very short period of time, Americans moved from an idea that government has no role in the economy to the idea that government should play, if not a central role, then at least a prominent role in the economy.
Americans were looking for jobs, good jobs, and were finding them in the factories, retooled from World War II. At the encouragement of state government, industry exploded across New Jersey and Newark. But with industry comes need.
The water supply planners back then, the engineers, the dam builders, they were looking at the northeastern New Jersey area, they called it the Metropolitan District, and trying to figure out where that would get its water. They are outstripping the water sources nearby.
In heavily populated East Jersey, dominated by Newark, water was becoming scarce.
Happy Dagoversary, Miss Cassie, 21 months. Going to be 2 years very soon. Thank you so much for being here, Cass. We appreciate you. We love you. Always exciting to see these anniversaries pop up. So thank you guys for being part of this community and this family. And I promise you guys, this is not as boring as you think. This is a very interesting history lesson, and there's more to it as we go along with the lake and things like that, as you'll find out. So just bear with it, please. It is definitely a beautiful place, Cap. I agree.
The unspoken acknowledgement that factories would be forced to ration water frightened many decision makers in Newark and across the state.
They wanted to find a water source that would supply what they needed then, a clean water source for them, but also looking at future growth.
After the drought of 1929, smaller cities in North Jersey tapped the easily accessible water supplies to the north, while more populous cities became mired in politics, bickering, and incremental change. It's like arriving late at the picnic grounds on an August Sunday. One newspaper wrote of the procrastination. You won't get that shady table by the brook.
They had a number of projections up through about 50 years at that time, looking at how many more people would there be in that district and trying to find a water source that would supply all those people.
State officials were charged with looking for new sources of water farther west in New Jersey to satiate manufacturing needs.
People started looking outward. That meant going west to what was then the unpopulated wooded areas.
A call to action began appearing in Newark newspapers. Go west or go without. The question was rapidly becoming not one of when or if, but instead, just how far west.
Business brought prosperity to the state. Dirt roads disappeared and pavement appeared.
There are no natural lakes in New Jersey that could supply the amount of water needed to support the major population centers in northeast New Jersey. That's why the reservoirs were built.
Another painful drought in 1953 reignited fears of scarcity.
Oh, yeah, I know where it's at, Cap. It's pretty wild. The story's neat, but it kind of flows into the whole theory, the weird, creepy, unexplained, and scary Saturday stuff. This is weird to me, okay? But then there's a little bit of the creepy aspect that comes after the fact when everything is said and done, that the stories that have been told and heard about this place after the fact. So, but it's a beautiful, beautiful area that, well, you'll find out. But yeah, not too far from PA. That's true. Very true.
There was a terrible, terrible drought. It almost drained the reservoirs in the northern part of New Jersey, almost drained them dry. Almost. Something had to be done. And then, of course, Round Valley came into view.
Round Valley is ideally suited for a reservoir because of its topography. A lot of water can be stored for what is comparatively small disruption of land surface. It's the best site in New Jersey for a reservoir of that sort.
The politicians settled on Round Valley, the hole. With a perfect basin shape large enough for the proposed reservoir and its light population, it seemed a natural choice to feed the rest of the state. And so Round Valley has been represented as sort of a last chance for a huge new reservoir, one paper wrote, entirely within the state's boundaries.
Everybody was agitated about it. We had a lot of meetings.
That sounds awesome, Satiris. I'd love
Local lawmakers'
to see
objections fell on deaf ears elsewhere in the state. On June 1st, 1956, the Round Valley Acquisition Act was rushed through the state halls in Trenton and signed by Governor Robert B. Maynard. Of the 21 counties in New Jersey, only Hunterdon County, home to Round Valley, voted against it.
This is a democracy. The majority rules. The valley was taken, and they were going to make a reservoir.
Round Valley Reservoir flooded a valley where people lived.
Now think about this, guys, because this happened more than once. The government does what they do to what they think help other people. Okay, but this big body of water here, there were people that lived underneath this at one time. They had Christmas and babies were born and birthdays and weddings and kids playing in the park, and they plowed fields and raised animals and farms and did all that. And now it's just water. It's all underneath that. It was at one time life, and it's not anymore. That's the weirdest thing about this whole thing to me. And then after the fact, as you'll see with this big reservoir, the stories that have come out of this, which I'm sure Cap has heard before, of people that like go into this and they're never seen again and things like that. It's just wild to me, the whole conglomeration of everything is in the story. So
It does seem like a mysterious place sometimes when you're there. With the bowl shape, you do get the winds whipping up. You will get the fog rolling in, and then you can't see the shoreline. You have the feeling that people are seeing things in the water.
Despite vocal opposition from Round Valley, $46 million to be repaid to taxpayers through the sale of water was allocated for a special bond to fund the project. Newark was to be the state's first and largest customer.
The state knew they were going to get Round Valley. They knew the rest of the state would vote for it. All they had to do was press the button, and in the valley went the appraisers.
Almost overnight, appraisers descended on the valley.
The day the man came and knocked on the door, and I was there, and I answered it, and he said, "I came to appraise your property for the state." I said, "We don't want to sell." He said, "You have no choice."
The state's offer was absolute. Residents were to sell their houses, barns, land, and livestock. The rest would be seized by eminent domain to accommodate a pipeline to Newark for the public good. Like the Lenape before them, generations needed to be moved out in the name of progress.
We were going to keep our house. After we sold it to them, we got the option to buy it back if we wanted to, and we decided to do that. A lot of them did.
The state wanted the land, not the houses. Residents could purchase their homes back from the government and move them further uphill. Those who didn't
Please do send it, Satyrus. Please do. I'm looking forward to it.
would have their houses dismantled, brick by brick.
If you bought it from the state, it was your responsibility to get it out of there. They weren't going to be involved in any of that.
Undeveloped land was made available from the state for residents to purchase at the top of the hill, looking down into the reservoir. Houses would be placed along a road so new that it hadn't even been named yet. Not everyone in Round Valley intended to leave so easily or so quietly. Farmers John Goska and Silvo Lanza vowed to fight the eviction. Adjacent farmers with a combined 240 acres of farmland, they owned less than 10% of the total space in Round Valley, but dominated its north side. Angry over principle and with wounded pride from the appraiser's low offer, Goska and Lanza prepared to dig in. Goska, a Polish immigrant with new roots in the valley, told a local paper, "I pulled out rocks with these arms that have never felt the same since. I feel rotten after working so hard." Contractors for the massive Round Valley project submitted bids, including one from local engineer Paul Rigo. Rigo had done business in Newark for years with Mayor Hugh Addonazio, a former 7-term U.S. congressman and World War II Silver Star veteran. In a 5-year stretch alone, Rigo and his firm kicked back $250,000 for Newark engineering jobs. Meanwhile, back in the valley, the difficulty of moving out and moving entire houses up the hill was becoming readily apparent.
The main road was a dirt road, straight across the bottom of the valley and out the other side. That was the access into the valley.
With only the slight, steep valley road meant for light traffic, progress was slowed until residents could forge a new path through the valley. Through farmers' fields and across yards, Round Valley would finally have another road.
And it took time to prepare the route that we all were going to use. We had to make a road to get them up there. And we did that. We all worked together and we all put our money together to raise the power lines and telephone lines and so on. A lot of pre-work.
The Round Valley, where just a year earlier residents didn't even lock their doors, was no longer recognizable. Houses were shuttered, abandoned, or moved as quickly as arrangements could be made.
One woman, she said, when we had to turn over the key to the house to the state, and she said, but we never locked the door, so we had to have a locksmith come in and make a key so we could give a key to the state.
Police patrolled the valley every hour to prevent outsiders from looting.
People had moved out of their houses and had left a lot of things in their homes, yet they hadn't moved everything out. My husband stayed with it. He stayed out in the field and slept in it on the tractor trailer thing. He had a stepladder that he used to get in and out of it because it was up off the ground. But let me tell you, it's strange seeing your house in the middle of the field. But he was not going to leave it because it had all our belongings in it.
With the new road came the panic, and with the panic came the con men with big promises and bigger trucks.
I didn't see how it could be moved. A man came in and said he could cut the house in the middle. Well, that man eventually moved at one of the other houses and he lost it coming up the hill. It slid right off whatever he had. This other man came in, he says, no, I'll move the house in one trip. He said, if you weren't going up that hill, I put a cup of water on your dining room table and it wouldn't spill a drop. It's an eerie feeling watching your house go up a hill. When it started, the bulldozer started churning. It really was a lot of anguish, a lot of anguish. I just think it's hard to explain the emotions that people went through. When they moved our house out of Round Valley, they had to come up a steep cliff and they had a huge bulldozer was pulling it. He couldn't get it all the way up the hill. It started slipping. And we were frantic that we were going to lose the house. As it was, we had one crack in the wall that it made coming up the hill. A lot of them were moved quite a distance. Some of them were moved 15 miles.
16 houses were moved out of the valley that summer, inch by inch, heavy against the will of the hill. The other 10 remained property of the state. Gasca and Lanza continued to hold out, a pushback against the state's mandate. For over 10 years, I've put sweat, blood, and heart attacks into this place, said the schoolteacher Lanza, as condemnation loomed in July of 1957. You won't find another one like it in the valley.
A great many of them were very embittered. They felt that the government didn't treat them right. Not only that, but when your family's been in a place for many generations, I mean, that's your home. That's your heritage. That's everything that you ever knew was wrapped up in that valley. And suddenly now it's going to be a reservoir.
Lanza in particular was wounded by his fractured and scared community. The people around here shivered in their boots because they were afraid, he said. We'll be condemned. That's the only way they're going to get it. It will be an amazing thing if their conscience lets them sleep.
It was a heartbreaking thing to see these beautiful homes being dismantled and moved out and families broken up. They had a lot of the inmates from the reformatory came down and they tore down the houses. They tore my parents' house down. I wish I could tell you how people felt deep in their hearts about what was happening to properties that they loved so much. To see the tractors and the things come in and start plowing through it. They were going to destroy them. I was watching my father-in-law as they were auctioning off the cattle that he had raised. And it broke my heart to see him standing there and seeing all these cattle being sold. It just broke his heart and broke my heart too to see this happening. We had so many tears and it was so upset during this. And it just seemed like the more we fought it, the worse it became. People were losing everything they had invested in so many years. It was their home from generation to generation. And we couldn't do anything about it.
It was a special place. There is a good feel to it. So people remember there was a town there. In fact, they may have heard. I have seen Round Valley from the shore. I've seen it from the blimp. If you see photos of what was going on when the reservoir was being formed, there's a whole lot of earth moving equipment. There's a whole lot of rock and earth, but no, you can't see buildings in there. Of course, because there are no buildings.
By 1961, the valley floor had been raised. Generations old homes were either bulldozed or moved uphill to the newly christened Valley Crest Road. Valley Road, once the main artery of commerce and community life, vanished. During 5 more dry, slow years, drought affected the entire northeastern United States. Huge dams were erected along the northern and southern borders of the valley, choking off the outside world. Filling began in 1966, just a trickle at first, then pumping continuously for 9 years until 55 billion gallons of water were stored in the valley.
Those pumps were gigantic. I mean, they were huge. I would go down there and just listen to them turn them on was frightening because they were so big and so powerful. You could drive a pickup truck in that pipe. It was so big. It was so big.
But as the valley slowly filled, its water's eventual destination, Newark, backed out of the contract. Other cities nearby followed suit, a devastating blow to the farmers displaced for the greater good. Not a drop of Round Valley water would find its way east. With the pipeline...
So they did all that for no reason, basically, because everybody backed out of it. The whole reason was to provide the water to them that, you know, they'd pay for this, that, and everything else. Then it didn't happen. All those people did that for nothing. That's so sad to me.
Project scrapped, contractor Paul Rigo, under mob threat, fled south of the border. From his hideaway in Mexico, he agreed to testify against Newark Mayor Hugh Adenazio. On September 22, 1970, the verdict came down for the disgraced mayor, guilty. Adenazio served 9 years of a decade-long sentence, all the while threatening to get Paul. He died in 1981 before carrying out his threat. Meanwhile, Rigo disappeared into federal witness protection, where he remained living in constant fear until his death in 1990.
You ever go in a house that feels good? This house felt good. I guess it was like a dream world when I look back on it. It was a little bit on a different angle. I would kind of stagger because it was no longer level like I had been in the valley. It was off a little bit, so it made you kind of walk differently. I don't even like to go and buy it anymore. I don't like to go and buy it anymore.
I think most Americans still have that sense of destiny, that we are on the right side. Even when we make mistakes, we're doing the right thing. Our greater purpose is a good one. We tend not to question that ideal.
Round Valley still exists on a map today, not as a town or as a farming community, but as a reservoir and state park. Situated high above, the victims of progress can still stare deep into the waters.
We work in this country for the common good. We build schools for the common good. We build roads for the common good. There had to be a reservoir someplace. There had to be.
When the authorities are planning a water supply, reservoir, or any facility, they're usually looking at what it would cost to build it, and even the cost of disrupting the people that are there. I'm sure the people who lived at the site were unhappy. I understand that very well. The benefit to the state outweighed the imposition, the hardships imposed on them.
Someday, there's going to be a very severe drought, and they're going to need that water. Somebody is.
The valley that once housed and fed generations of native peoples and farmers is hidden forever beneath billions of gallons of water. Intended to feed the thirsts of millions, the reservoir now stands as a reminder of how easy it can be to wash away the past overnight.
How sad is that? You know what I mean? The pictures that I saw, the town was beautiful before that happened, and for no reason. Then, hold on. Hang on. Okay, hold on here. Hey, Phil. Wow, that's wild, Phil. Oh my God, I wish this would stop. Okay, so give me a minute. All right, here we go.
Welcome to Round Valley Reservoir, a place with mystery. In 1960, it was decided by the Water Authority to create the reservoir it is today. Since its creation, many have come to enjoy the beauty of the reservoir. But the locals will tell you the reservoir is cursed. Here is my first experience on the reservoir. I'll let you decide. So this lake is a 9/9 only lake for trolling motor. Of course, you can use your trolling motor pretty much everywhere. But we got the 9/9, so that makes this boat very, very good for what we're doing here. See if we can get this baby fired up.
This is the reservoir now. As of last year, June 13th of last year. And imagine the thing that kills me.
In 1854, Round Valley and the Yuki people, a tribe of about 12,000, got its...
Is the fact that looking at this big, huge body of water, there's a town under that. And this happens everywhere. I've heard of what Phil's talking about. The Quabbin Reservoir, or I think it's pronounced Quabbin, in Massachusetts. Yeah, I'll show you guys that here too real fast when we get through this quick video.
You can see some of this really cool plant life here. Really getting good shots. I'm not seeing any signs of any fish as of yet, so we'll see what we can do here. Bottom. Just underspin just doesn't seem to be activating anybody here.
I was hoping he was supposed to go out and...
There's a part of me that wants to take out a spinnerbait, see if I can kind of get a little bit louder.
Maybe not. Anyway, we'll move forward then, because there's another one too. But
so we're still working this group here. We got to...
Yeah, I'm good on... We don't need to watch somebody fish. My understanding of the way it read was he was going to troll through the whole lake and show you guys, but that's... No worries. Guess I should have scanned that one first. I'm sorry, you guys. But hold on here. We covered the main for today, but I was trying to add some of these things to this for you guys. Where's it at? Maybe not. Okay. Well, 1 second. Here we go. Actually fits with it, Phil. So here we go. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Phil. I hope you feel better soon.
State.
The fact that the towns are not around, people are always wondering what it was like there. It's like a lost Atlantis. What was it like?
It was just a thriving community, the way everybody worked together and cared about each other, even though they weren't related.
But by the early 1890s, with that wave of immigration from mostly Europe, they needed a lot more water, not only for Boston, but many of the towns and cities around it.
They took that because of the water supply that was available. It was the easiest way for them to get it, them being.
This is the place Bill was talking about. There's 4 towns underneath this body of water. It's so crazy to me. It is one of the weirdest things I've ever heard, you guys, to have a full existence of a community, a whole community, a town full of people gone. They turned it into a lake. That's crazy to me. Hey, CC. It's kind of like I said, we won't go through this whole thing, but just pieces of it, and I have some other stuff to give you guys.
The government.
Dana, Enfield, Greenwich, and Prescott, the 4 towns were dissolved. So that's why we only have 351 towns in the state and cities and not 355.
It's become an accidental.
Before that, I mean, they had the store in the valley where everybody gathered.
What did they sell?
Everything from rubber boots to kerosene. They sold everything.
Most people lived comfortable existences. What you hear a lot from people's histories is they say, we didn't know we were poor. We were farmers, we had land, we owned our home, we had a community, we had enough to eat.
A lot of them were farmers. Some of them worked in some of the factories and mills in the valley. A few of them were storekeepers. They generally were what you would call WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, descendants of many of the original settlers who came in the 1730s and 40s and 50s.
The community was extremely close. Everybody knew their history, everybody knew who they were related to, and they were content.
Why did they take the 4 towns?
Boston never had enough water and did not have good water. Jamaica Pond was one of the first water sources, and the city grew and the surrounding areas grew so quickly.
So I'm going to recommend you guys go check this out because I can't run this whole thing, but it's interesting. I'm going to go watch this myself. The 4 Lost Towns, the Dividing Scar is what it's called. And then I'll show you the other things that I had for you that were actually creepier. I just wanted to show you those few things, but thank you for throwing that up, Phil, because that's actually really interesting to me. I love history. So, okay, now back to the creepy stuff. Well, anyway, the reservoir from the last town that we just watched, supposedly there's stories about people going missing up there, never being seen again. They go up there on boats and whatnot. They disappear. I don't know how true it is. You know what I mean? Just, you know how these stories go. So now I have a compilation for you guys that I was going to show after we covered the main on this to cover up or to give you guys as we go out. So here we go. Hang on. As soon as it loads. Hopefully that heals up good, Bill. Hang on, guys. It doesn't want to load. Give me one. Okay, here we go. I think it's going to load. As I said, supposedly there are many, many towns that this has happened to.
Everyone, and welcome back to our channel. I'm your host Emily, and today we're going to be counting down our list of the top 10 evil towns that disappeared without a trace. Number 10, Centralia, Pennsylvania. Centralia was once a thriving mining town, but in 2009, the last living residents were finally evacuated from the town due to its toxic atmosphere and general ground instability. Since mining was no longer a career or necessity in the early 60s, the town's mining shafts were left abandoned and untouched, many of which ran straight beneath the town. In 1962, a fire, whose origins are unknown, ravaged these mining tunnels, turning Centralia.
So I know how the fire started. We covered Centralia about 3 years ago, like in depth. But the fire started. It was what they used to do is they used to collect the town's garbage and they would take it all to a specified dump, and then they would burn that. Little by little by little, they would burn it. Well, I believe they would burn it and then they buried it. Okay. And what they did was they did that. Well, underneath the town were coal mines in Centralia, Pennsylvania. That was many, many places through that area into West Virginia that had coal mines that were worked like crazy. So what they did was they buried the garbage. It was still on fire, and it caught the mines on fire, and it has been burning ever since. And they evacuated the town long time ago, little by little by little. There was like 2 people living in this town still. And I think, like they just said, in 2009, everybody was finally completely, totally evacuated from it. And it still burns to this day. I've been there when you could still drive into the town and watched it. There's little pockets like these holes here and stuff all around the town that smoke comes about it because it's still burning slightly under there. Not anywhere near as bad as it was, but slightly. So that's what happened in Centralia. This is the town again that Silent Hill, the game and the movie, was fashioned after.
Australia into a furnace, burning 140 acres of land and producing temperatures upward of 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit under the earth. 1,000 degrees. That's crazy. Now, this not only caused the ground to crack, but produced toxic smoke as well as ground temperatures that made much of the town uninhabitable. There was no way to extinguish these fires, and they continue to burn hot to this day. Now, if this scenario sounds familiar, that's because it is. Horror fans know that the game Silent Hill was based on this town's tragic history. These days, no one lives there, but I can't believe people were still there in 2009. Number 9, West Castleton, Vermont. West Castleton, once small, was once home to the slate quarries that New England is now known for. It was also the home to immigrants from Ireland, Russia, and Italy post-Civil War, and thrived for some time around 1850 when West Castleton Railroad and Slate Company found themselves on the shore of Lake Bomoseen. For roughly 50 years, West Castleton was able to ride the wave of the boom and bust era, but quickly fell to its eventual demise in 1929. It continued to fight a losing battle against the times as slate was no longer a popular option in construction, and that's what they were known for. By the time the Great Depression took hold of the Green Mountain State, the quarries were drained and rendered unprofitable in the 1930s. Along with its moneymaker,
I was there in like 1996 is when I went there with my friends. It's really not that too far from here. But yeah, like Alicia said, put that into perspective. That was only 16 years ago that they have finally evacuated, and there's still churches and buildings standing there. And as you walk into the town, you can still see smoke all over the place. It's absolutely weird to me because literally right outside the town, there are thriving towns all around it that people live and drive and work in, and you drive around this town that is on fire underneath, and it has been for years, folks, and I mean years. It's really crazy. It really is.
Becoming abandoned, the town was, as well as the people, up and left their homes in search of better opportunities, which makes the most sense. Remnants of the town remain in Bomoseen State Park, where hikers can find various homes crumbling and caving in, but still standing, that remind them what the 1930s were like. Number 8. Seattle Underground, Washington. Many have heard of the Great Seattle Fire, which occurred in 1889, but not many know Seattle was also home to an underground shopping network. These stores took a hit after the fire, and though they remained open, the city was eventually condemned in 1907. It had become home to dodgy dealings and was deemed fairly unsafe to wander around at that point, while also giving off a creepy vibe of something that was once thriving, but now remained a shell of what it had once homed. Today, some of these underground passageways have been restored and are open for tours. However, many remain closed to the public and are abandoned still to this day. Number 7. Bullowville, Florida. This land was destined for use as a plantation by Charles Bulow in 1821. The goal was to house and grow cotton, indigo, rice, and even sugarcane, with an additional mill building under the construction of John Bulow. The local natives, the Seminole Indian tribe, didn't appreciate their land being turned into profit and set fire to the setup around January 11th, 1836. And listen, I usually don't support arson, but in this case, good for them. Abandoned by January 23rd, a great rosy glow was observed on January 31st in St. Augustine. John Bulow, discouraged by the destruction, died 3 months later at the age of 26 and was buried in St. Augustine. All that is left today of this plantation are the ruins of the sugar mill, several wells, a spring house, and a crumbling foundation of the mansion. The cleared fields have been reclaimed by the forest, and the area looks much as it did when it belonged to the Seminoles. Number 6. Roanoke Island, North Carolina. The legend of Roanoke Island has been passed down from generation to generation since 1590, when a group of 120 English settlers mysteriously vanished. In the late 1500s, the English made their first attempts to settle in North America on Roanoke Island, which is off the coast of North Carolina. These first settlers ended up returning to England because of a shortage of food and Indian attacks. In 1587, a second colony was founded on Roanoke. It was then that Virginia Dare, the first baby born to English parents in North America, was born. John White, the leader of the colony, went to England to get more supplies, but when he returned in 1590, the settlement was deserted. All the settlers had mysteriously disappeared, and the only clue he found was the word Croatoan carved in a tree. Croatoan was the name of an island south of Roanoke that was home to a Native American tribe of the same name. Perhaps then the colonists were abducted by Native Americans, but to this day no one knows what happened to them. Number 5. Langville, Montana. Langville was actually a real town in a small rural spot, possibly on the Eastern Plains. Now, apparently it vanished entirely sometime in the early 2000s. The town even showed up on Google Maps, but no one could find it in person. Google Maps apparently has saved images from street views, but no map of the town. There's also been more than 7 million recorded searches for the town, and they have come up with no one seems to know why or explain this, as it doesn't exist. Today you'll struggle to find any photos or online mention of it. Legend has it that sometime in the early 1900s, a mysterious force swept over Langville and turned its inhabitants inside out. The inside out inhabitants either died off or disappeared shortly after. Then some entity or organization didn't want anyone to know what happened. They came along and washed away all evidence of the town's existence. The cover-up went so far as to scrub the internet of any mentions, evidence, or accounts. Believers would tell you that Langville disappeared because its people vanished under nefarious circumstances. Furthermore, they believe the government wants to keep it a secret from us, and it seems like only the inhabitants could give us the truth. Number 4. St. Pierre, Martinique. In the late 1890s and early 1900s, St. Pierre, Martinique was known as a beautiful town, but they had something unique: a volcano. Now, citizens of the area were so used to the volcanic activity that no one took it seriously when fresh steaming vent holes and earth tremors started during April 1902. The minor explosions began at the summit of the volcano, ash began to rain down continuously, and the nauseating stench of sulfur filled the air. Again, no one thought this was an issue and that they should have left town. Even worse, more than 100 snakes slithered down and invaded the town. Then on May 5th, a landslide of boiling mud and water from the Etang Set crater lake spilt into the River Blanche. It was followed by a tsunami that ended the lives of hundreds of people. Then 3 days later, May 8th, Mount Pelee exploded, sending an avalanche of white-hot lava straight towards the town. Within 3 minutes, St. Pierre was completely obliterated, and of its 30,000 population, there were only 2 people who survived. This was the worst volcanic disaster of the 20th century. Number 3, the New City Complex, New Jersey. This town was originally called the New City Complex, but later was called Demon's Alley, and you'll find out why. Located along Route 23, the town was built by the City of New York Water and Reservoir Plant in order to house the workers of the facility. Things seemed to be pretty normal for a while, and then in 1992, it was found that the homes were abandoned with no sign of burglary and everything in order, all possessions left behind, and in some cases, even meals left out for people who would never come home to eat them. Ever since, legends have abounded. One very popular story is that in the 1980s, a stranger moved into the town, after which there were various unexplained phenomena, and it was soon suspected that this newcomer was a cult leader. The mysterious individual then apparently led most of the townspeople down into the basement of one of the homes on false pretenses, and then proceeded to have their lives ended by members of his cult. Now, there's no evidence that this took place, but the legend persists. Other theories are that the homes are abandoned set of a movie, or the site of a bout of rando or carbon monoxide poisoning, or that it was haunted, but no one really knows. For now, these houses sit rotting away and have become a popular urban legend in the area. Number 2, Erkhammer, Iowa. This small rural town was apparently in rather good shape until around 1928, when some aerial photos emerged that appeared to show that there was no one living there and that the field looked overgrown and untended. Things took a turn for the weird when there was a report from a tourist passing through who stopped at a gas station in the town to fill his tank, after which he had learned he had been ripped off and there was no gasoline in there at all. He then angrily headed back to town, but reported that he could not reach it, as it seemed to forever remain in the distance no matter how fast he drove. Even when he ran out of gas and walked, he could not reach the town, which was still sitting there before him, forever out of his reach. Other people driving past the town began to report that the previously bustling town seemed to be abandoned and lifeless, and when some investigated, they found rows and rows of houses sitting peacefully with no sign of the occupants. Other reports of anomalies would come in from the town as well, such as people who seemed to have witnessed the town actually evaporating into thin air, as if being absorbed into some other dimension, with one such account concerning a group fleeing from the area during the Dust Bowl of 1932 and going to the town to retrieve supplies. And coming in at number 1 is Ashley, Kansas. Ashley was a tiny farming community of around 700 people, and on August 16, 1952, the area was rocked by a massive earthquake measuring 7.9 on the scale. When investigators finally arrived, it was oddly found that there was simply no one there. There was a smoking, heat-belching blaze fissure measuring 1,000 yards in length and approximately 500 yards in width. They found no one there, neither alive nor dead, even after a 12-day intensive search. An aftershock allegedly rocked the region in the coming days after the aborted search, and when rescuers arrived this time, the fissure was reportedly gone as mysteriously as it had appeared. Now, days before everyone disappeared on August 8th, there was a report from a local who claimed he had seen a small black opening in the sky, and not long after, police were bombarded with calls reporting the same thing. Things got stranger still when reports kept coming in about the weird atmospheric anomalies, and that there were also people who had mysteriously gone missing without a trace. Other reports would filter in that the town was in total darkness, as if the sun had never risen. Perhaps even more bizarre still were the reports that people were having conversations with long dead family members. Police would get hundreds of similar calls in the coming days, after which it was claimed that all of the children in the town had spontaneously vanished middle of the night on August 12, 1952. And by August 16th, everyone was gone. Well, that's all for our list of the top 10 evil towns that disappeared without a trace. What do you think happened to these places?
Okay. And the other one. It is a big earthquake, I agree. If that's true. Come on, computer needs to work. 1 moment. Hold on. I don't know what my problem with my computer tonight. Sorry. Either that or my internet's just being stupid again, which is very possible, as you guys know how that goes. Okay. Oh, now let's try this again. Come on. Here it is. I think this is it. Okay, so this was the Urkhammer story. I probably should have played this beforehand, but I wanted to get you guys into that first to give you the ideas of the other towns. So, and you've heard Dublin already per se. So here you go.
Fully explain. Strange disappearances and unsolved mysteries tickle that weird itch in all of our brains that sparks our curiosity and intrigue. Some disappearances are no less than stranger than the stories of towns that also seemingly disappear off the face of the earth to never be seen again. It has seemingly happened numerous times throughout history, and we are left scratching our heads as to what took place. Today on Unbluring the Unknown, we dive into an internet mystery just as much as it is a physical one. The towns of Doveland, Wisconsin, and Urkhammer, Iowa, whose existence is hotly debated on the internet on whether or not these towns were real and into the history behind them, and whether or not these stories of disappearing American towns are pure fantasy or have some basis in reality. Today, we go over Doveland and Urkhammer, the towns that never existed. Welcome back to Unblurring the Unknown. As always, I am your host, Dominic, and today we dive into a topic that is one that is kind of different from something that I've ever done before. Of course, I have covered missing persons and even missing planes, but missing towns? That is something I have yet to do. And what separates the couple that I'm going to talk about today is that these towns and the existence of them seems to be rooted on the internet. And the idea of them even existing seems to be very hotly debated, with some people claiming to have merch and even t-shirts from these towns, and other sides of the aisle saying that these stories of these towns are merely hoaxes created by people on the internet. The world is littered with ghost towns, but this is a whole different thing. And maybe that these towns that maybe, as we go into this episode, maybe they have never even existed in the first place. Hopefully this shines a light onto the human fascination with these towns that seemingly get lost to time. So how today's episode is going to work is that I'm going to go into a little bit of the history of both Doveland, Wisconsin and Herkimer, Iowa, talk a little bit about their backstories and whether or not these towns actually existed at some point, and then we will talk about some other examples of towns lost to time, and then we will wrap it all up at the very end with my own personal thoughts. Now, with that being said, let's start with Doveland, Wisconsin. Now, you would think that many towns would have written oral histories about them, and that information would be relatively easy to find in the grand scheme of things, and that's where you would be wrong. The only record we have of Doveland, Wisconsin would have originated from, and therefore the first mention of it to ever circulate the internet would be sometime around 2015, as that date is up for discussion. So we know the first mention of Doveland, Wisconsin was, again, mentioned in 2015. Before that, there had been no mention of a Doveland, Wisconsin. So, again, keep that in the back of your mind for now. Now, the mention of Doveland would appear on a now archived question thread where the original poster of this question thread posted the following question of, quote unquote, anyone here ever heard about Doveland, Wisconsin? Now, of course, this thread happened to be on Tumblr. And in this Tumblr thread, it goes on to describe Doveland as this town that seemingly at one point existed and is now completely off the map, with any trace of it erased from existence as well. Now, this Tumblr thread goes on to state that the town would have disappeared sometime around the late 1980s and early 1990s. At one section, this Tumblr thread reads, and I quote, "Nobody seems to remember Doveland."
All right, so I'm going to scan through that since we covered Doveland already, and I'm going to put you guys in Erkland real quick. Herkimer, I'm sorry.
Of Wisconsin. Now, way was wiped off the face of the map or completely passed, and others online and those who live in Wisconsin have debated the claim area for Project Sanguine. And the idea of don't need this town anymore, let's completely flood it. That still in and of itself doesn't make any sense. This was some type of government cover-up / kind of them flooding the dams in Wisconsin, of course, but very unlikely as the largest recorded earthquake. And to be honest with you, I'm not even going to dive into that theory because that sounds like something of the story to make it sound more and more interesting. Now, I want to believe it, but I just can't. And that kind of leads us into the second town I want to discuss today as well, because this one shares similar characteristics in terms of the story of the town's origin, but is kind of very different from Doveland, Wisconsin, because it seems to be there's more of a story that exists with Herkimer, Iowa. Now, Herkimer, Iowa was supposedly a town situated along Route 41 in Iowa, and like many small towns in the Midwest during the early 1900s, there was really nothing setting this town apart from much of the rest. It kind of blended in with all the other little small towns that were littered across the Midwest during this time period. However, two supposed stories of the town hit newspapers in 1929 and later in 1932, telling stories about this town and how it was found abandoned. In 1929, the Clarion Sun Telegraph out of Davenport, Iowa, reported that a plane had flew over the town of Herkimer and saw that the town looked to be a maze of unattended homes and fields. And in some accounts of this story, these spaces that were supposed to have houses and streets, they just weren't there. Now, the story continues and says that it was just kind of these endless fields in this town where the town was supposed to be, and there was no buildings, there was no streets, it was just empty. However, as the legend goes, this story was picked up by many mainstream newspapers about the disappearing town of Herkimer, but unfortunately, the story did not get that much press in mainstream media during this time, as the Wall Street crash of 1929 was taking place at almost the exact same time, so that dominated the headlines. Now, later in 1932, a caravan of farming families from Illinois were traveling towards California and decided to make a pit stop in the town of Herkimer. Now, they made camp near the outskirts of the town, and that night, the families of the caravan pooled what money they had together at the time and decided that they should send a couple of men from the group to check out the town and the general store. Seems normal so far. Now, when the men arrived at the town, it kind of seemed totally normal until they tried to walk up the front steps of the general store. Now, when the men approached the general store and they tried to walk up the front steps into the building, their feet passed straight through the boards of the steps and onto the ground below, almost like the steps of the building weren't there in the first place. Now, this, of course, mystified the men, who on closer examination realized the whole building of the general store was like this. It looked real, but it wasn't. Like it was a mirage that was kind of fading out of existence entirely. Now, the men picked up another nearby loose board and tried to place it on the steps as an attempt to walk up them, and when they tried that, their feet also passed straight through. Now, the men quickly rushed back to the caravan to repeat the oddities that were kind of occurring in Urkhammer to the rest of this kind of caravan. And when they arrived back and they relayed this kind of unbelievable story to the other members of the camp, they, of course, did not believe them. You know, they're like, this is no way. You're making this up. This does not make any sense. You're drunk, whatever. And the members of the camp actually changed their opinions pretty quickly when they realized that the men didn't spend all that money that they were given on booze and that these men were actually completely sober. Because initially, again, they thought that they were drunk. They thought they went into the general store, grabbed all this booze, and are spinning a yarn about how the general store doesn't exist. But they were completely sober, and they still had that money that the other members of the caravan had given them. So other members of the caravan of these farming families thought there must be some type of truth to the story that these men were telling them. So the caravan packed up about a dozen or so of the men that were part of the group, some of them clad with guns, and they went back to the town of Urkhammer to investigate, and they too noticed that the town itself seemed not there, but rather just ghostly silhouettes of these buildings that looked like they were there, but they weren't. And they returned to camp, and rightfully so, realizing that this was kind of a literal ghost town, they packed up all their belongings and quickly made for the hills, and for that, I don't really blame them. Now, hearing this story, the Iowa State Police decided they wanted to investigate the growing reports of the town that kind of seems to be fading from reality. And according to how the legend of Urkhammer, Iowa goes, when a deputy from the Iowa State Police went to the town to question some townsfolk who lived there, he was also met with his hand passing straight through a house door when he attempted to knock on it. After this, it seems the legend of Urkhammer continues, that the town continued to kind of fade from reality until nothing remained. People who drove by the former town of Urkhammer no longer saw children playing in the yards of homes. They started to slowly see livestock. They couldn't be seen anymore on farms until, again, pretty much the only thing left in the town of Urkhammer, Iowa, was just these endless untended fields of emptiness. However, the stories of Urkhammer would not be real, unfortunately, and the origin of Urkhammer would also date back to around 2015, when an internet writer named Cullen Hudson wrote on a website that he ran called Strange State. Hudson would tell this story that his mother found, the story of Urkhammer, Iowa, when she was cleaning out her email inbox, and his mother, Hudson's mother, knew that he had an interest in these type of, strange stories and oddities and things like that, and basically said, "Hey, Cullen, here is this story of this weird town, and here you go. You like this kind of stuff. Here you go." And then because of that, Hudson published the story on Strange State I guess that's from him saying this. So the internet then took it. Once Cullen Hudson put it on Strange State, the internet took it, continued to spread the legend of Urkhammer, Iowa, tell the stories, and eventually it made it onto all these other sites around the internet. However, of course, it does make me ask the question that if Hudson did not create this story himself, which I think he did, who did create the story if Hudson didn't create it? Now, it sounds very clearly to me that this sounds like a plot to a good science fiction book, and it actually might be. Now that I'm thinking about that, it might actually be the plot to a science fiction book, but don't quote me on that. I don't read a lot of science fiction novels. But it kind of brings me back to how I started the episode, and that being the question of why do we as humans continue to find intrigue and fascination with towns and cities that seemingly vanish off the face of the earth, regardless if they are real or fake? Of course, everyone loves a good urban legend and story. But what these stories of Urkhammer, Iowa, and Doveland, Wisconsin have in common is that these aren't the first stories of ghost towns, or towns that have seemingly vanished from public view, or have become complete ghost towns, with no explanation as to why that's the case. Perhaps the most mystifying case of a vanishing town or city, in my opinion, is one that originates in 1585. Now, of course, I won't go too in-depth into this story, as I can do a whole episode on it, and I probably will at some point along a later date. And this town being the lost colony of Roanoke. Now, anybody who knows early American history has probably heard of that, the lost colony of Roanoke in some capacity. You just don't know a lot of very...
Now, just to give a heads up, the article I read about Urkhammer states that it was a constructed story based off of a semi-true event. So take it for what it is, you guys. It's up to you, whatever you think.
Specific details about it. As the story roughly goes, with the lost colony of Roanoke, a group of settlers to the New World in what is now modern-day North Carolina established this colony called the Roanoke Colony. And this was an attempt by Sir Walter Raleigh to create the first established colony in North America. The colony was originally established, from what I could find, in 1585, and then later on in 1587, 117 men, women, and children would arrive at the colony and, of course, make it their new home. However, 3 weeks later, when the next ship from England would arrive, all of the men, women, and children would be gone. They all vanished without a trace. Now, this is a mystery that has endured for over 400 years, and this is a very real story. Unlike Urkhammer and Doveland, this is a very real story. And us as human beings are no closer to finding out what actually happened to these 117 individuals from the lost colony of Roanoke, because it looks like they had just disappeared off the face of the planet. Now, stories of Roanoke and other cities such as Machu Picchu, for example, fascinate the human imagination and inspire to create stories about places and events that we have no insight into. And although Doveland and Urkhammer might not be real places, of course, they pique human curiosity and make us wonder what other discoveries have yet to be made in the world of vanishing locations and even, people disappearing without a trace. Now, at this point of the episode, I would normally go into kind of thoughts and theories. But of course, there aren't really any theories when it comes to this, as both of these stories just happen to be made up. But that doesn't mean that there isn't stories out there of other towns, much like Urkhammer and Doveland, that actually have some real stories behind them. Now, take the example of Portlock, Alaska, for example, which is a very real case of a ghost town with a very haunting story about a Bigfoot-like creature that dismembered sheep hunters in the 1940s, as well as rampant ghost sightings in the town, and most notably around the nearby Chatham Bay region. Now, the hauntings and unexplained happenings in the town of Portlock, Alaska became so frequent, most of the town's residents actually had moved out by 1949, and finally the postmaster would move out in 1951, officially making Portlock, Alaska a ghost town. Now, whether or not you believe that there is a monster in Portlock, Alaska, or ghosts or anything like that, it does make stories such as military accidents in Dublin, Wisconsin, and Urkhammer, Iowa, seeming to fade out of existence and out of reality itself. It makes those stories seem much more believable. Of course, if you can believe a giant savage beast tearing sheep hunters limb from limb, you can probably believe that the U.S. government did something that they probably shouldn't have in this obscure Wisconsin town, or maybe even a town in Iowa seeming to transcend dimensions. Who knows? Even though they're fake, they're very fun to talk about. And I know that this was a little bit different of an episode for me, and because of that, I did hope that you enjoyed the little change of pace for this week's episode. Again, it is unfortunate that the towns of Dublin, Wisconsin, and Urkhammer, Iowa don't exist, but again, it casts a broader...
Yeah, he said it was late there. He had to get out. It's probably in the middle of the night at this point for him. So one of the links that I had for this didn't work earlier, so that's probably why it wasn't as much fun. But it was still kind of interesting to me, some of that stuff. What time is it? We've only been here 2.5 hours. That's not Well, I guess I could throw this at you too if you want it. Hold on. It's a pretty wild story. There you go. This will give you the scary aspect to it for the night. There's no proof that this is true or false, but there is proof that Portlock did have a disappearance too. But I don't know what the story is behind it. I couldn't find real sources for it, so here, take it for what it is.
The complete abandonment of a town is no small thing. It is generally assumed that there are natural reasons for people to just up and leave a certain area. In some ways, things like work in the area drying up can lead to a populated region's downfall. In other ways, chemical spills rendered a small area of a larger portion of a town uninhabitable, forcing out the locals. And in some other instances, a fire inadvertently started in a coal mine underneath the ground had been burning for decades, which forced the government to issue a ruling to get people out of there and destroy the way back to the town to keep out curious investigators for their own safety. All of these, even if horrendous by their very nature, are still very natural events. There is still even something more past that, stranger reasons for leaving an area. One of the strangest ones that I can think of, at least off the top of my head, which my main channel and subsequently this one are named for, is the disappearance of the Roanoke colony in North Carolina. Like way back in the day, they found the word Croatoan carved into a tree outside of the settlement and everybody was pretty much gone. But it seems like it may have really just been the name of the game back in the day. Disease could run through a settlement, destabilizing it to the point that people would have to abandon the town in order to survive. But what seems to make these even more unnatural, at least in the way of looking at them, is the lack of information, which tends to make our minds run wild with ideas and theories as to what really became of everyone. However, that's with information like in its absence. What happens if you have the information as to why people left, but it appears even stranger than what you would originally think to be a naturally occurring event? And what if this really didn't take place all that long ago? The abandonment of Portlock, Alaska is something that is incredibly disturbing because of the very idea of something lurking just beyond the woodline, waiting for a local to make a misstep as it brutally rips them apart. This is something we would consider to happen like well back in the 1700s, because back then you had a bunch of new people in a completely wild area with very little separating, the animals that lurk from the peoples that live in town. With Portlock, Alaska, however, its abandonment would fully take place between the 1940s until finally the last person would leave in 1951, 1 year after being the only person left, which my man was really committed to his post office job, good lord. But the question is, what was going on that was bad enough to scare an entire town of people away from their homes and livelihoods? Well, let's discuss that in today's episode over the abandonment of Portlock, Alaska. So first, a bit of history for you, because trust me, it's always relevant to know about the history of an area, because the funny thing is, typically before stories started circulating about a certain spot on the map, something was already known about it because a group of people were likely already there to begin with. And because of that, they've already experienced the state of odd occurrences and basically like, yeah, no, I'm good, and just left it or just passed a warning to their people about what could be found there. Portlock, Alaska is an area that resides in the southernmost area of the Kenai Peninsula. This area opens up Alaska to the Pacific Ocean, and in theory, had it been developed, would have been a pretty good way to get trade goods across the rest of Alaska, using this as an entry point. Due to Alaska being separated from the actual continental United States, getting goods there, it either has to go through like some pretty staunch wilderness of Canada, or be flown there directly or taken by boat. Either way, this was always kind of leaving Alaska with like an air of being untouched. It had been slower to develop than the rest of the country, and less people overall reside in the state. In fact, to try to boost people settling the land, the United States government would essentially give people a stipend for living there. But for the most part, the state itself is having difficulty. The population estimate of Alaska is around 736,556. That said, people are typically moving out of the state rather than moving into it. In fact, most Alaskans that move out tend to choose Texas to move to. And this sort of develops the idea that a specific type of person has chosen to live there. Nothing disparaging, but probably someone who likes their privacy, likes their land, and may distrust certain organizations that preside over the land. Anyways, the people that lived there before Portlock became a town were known as the Aleut, and they were well versed in something in that area that disturbed them as well. this large, hairy Bigfoot-type Yeti monster that they referred to as Nantinaq, or just big, hairy creature, and it would stalk the area and was a direct threat to any human that it came across. It should be noted that there is some pushback on this saying that the word had been purposely changed to fit a narrative after the concept of like Sasquatch or Bigfoot began to develop, so just keep that in mind. But that said, these people would avoid the area themselves because they weren't trying to end up 6 feet under the dirt. This respect for whatever was in the woods persisted amongst these people as they went through like storytelling for apparently like thousands of years. They also said the creature itself stayed alive for at least hundreds of years as well, which is a little odd, but if something was really out there, that might more or less suggest that maybe it's not the same creature, but something reproducing as it had an established population, which would actually track with what other people would say that they would see. This area would not be settled by the Aleuts despite that much time having passed, possibly because of the result of this. Then in 1786, landfall would be named by a man named Nathaniel Portlock. This British ship captain's arrival officially basically started the camp in this area because it had abundant salmon, so a cannery would be established to take advantage of the natural resources. There are a few discrepancies with like how everything happened. Some reports say that he actually went further to the north in the peninsula to Cook Inlet and really made landfall there, but it really doesn't matter at all because the town itself would be established in 1921 when the United States Post Office opened in town. During the town's first push to develop, they would be settled by Russian Aleuts, and I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Aleuts because of the Aleutian Islands, but anyways, for a time, not much was really reported to have happened in that area prior to the town's creation, except for one event in 1905. Likely there were a bunch of peculiar things happening, which we'll kind of go on to really discuss when it really ramped up here in a moment, but it seems like ever since the British captain arrived there, the first like 120 years, nothing was really happening and everything was just kind of turning up Millhouse. Eventually, a mine would also be opened because of the discovery of chromium. There was also gold in the area as well, and this brought in miners, but not as much as you would think. Typically, to live in this town, you had like one of 3 jobs. Either you worked as a lumberman, cutting down trees and exporting timber, you worked as a miner, digging out chromium and gold in the ground, or you worked as a fisherman. There was really a special bonus job also, and that's when you were just a Sasquatch. As the town continued to thrive to a degree due to these small operations, it would really not attract that many people overall. In fact, there was a census conducted in the 1940s and then subsequently again in the 1980s that would show only around 31 people were still living there, which is a little odd because like the 1980s, where did they come up with that information? Because of what we're going to talk about here in a moment. In 1905, the first strange event would be reported, but people had already been on edge around this time anyways, as I'm assuming based on their responses. Around this time, all of the cannery workers would begin to leave their jobs, citing that something mysterious was bothering the camp. When asked about what it was, they couldn't really give a description, but decided that they were going to leave the area for a year before anything could happen further. They would wrap up early that year and then head out, which people had already been living in town. Apparently, the people that were there wanted them to stay, as if there were more people around, the safer they felt. This would culminate into a full-blown panic later when the miners would start up and leaving. Prior to this, those workers at the cannery would come back the following year and find that the strange interactions would still continue. These strange interactions, however, would start to take a turn for the worse around the time of the 1920s and 1930s. Around this time and into the 1940s, people would start going missing, specifically sheep hunters that would venture out into the woods that just didn't show back up. This would spearhead a multitude of events of brutal occurrences that would cause everyone to sort of just abandon the town. After hunters who entered the woods began to go missing, it was considered, probably a little strange because these people would have been armed, and with that, their safety should have been assured. It's possible that an interaction took place that would start the rest of the brutalizations because, let's say for argument's sake, that there was something out in the woods, if it came across a hunter and the hunter was scared and took a pot shot at it, it would then learn that those things that look like us are violent. Possibly something was angered to the point that it began hunting down humans in that area in order to make it safer. I mean, really, it wouldn't be that any different than what humans do. If something takes out one of our own, we tend to try to find that thing and end it to secure our own lands. This is actually also exhibited in other mammals as well. In fact, there's a story of a tiger that was wounded by a hunter after he was sent to take care of it because it was known as a man-eater. After finding it, he winged it, but it was able to escape and elude him for quite some time until finally the hunter was forced to call off the hunt, only for the tiger to start tracking him the whole time, waiting for him to let his guard down before ultimately showing up at his camping spot. I believe the outcome was that he actually took it out at that point, because otherwise, how would we have this story? But the point is, animals, not just humans, appear to seek what is considered vengeance for some trespass. Anyhow, hunters began to go missing to the point that while exceedingly alarming, hearing stories about another missing person in the woods was just sort of horrifically commonplace. Things past this point would start to become even worse for the people living in this town. See, the town itself, like every other town in existence, was lived in by people who worked in the area and with their families. Why did I just take time to explain that? I have no idea. So the workers weren't really there to go out hunting or do anything along those lines, unless it was sort of for pleasure, but probably not for survival. But they still had to venture up to the mines, out to the streams and bay for salmon. And at some point or another, they had to leave the relative safety of the small town itself. This is when people started to get got just by existing. It was known around this time that miners working the mines were having issues of their own, just like pretty much everybody else was that went in the woods. As people would show up for work and head into said mines, they would eventually need a break for the day or go eat lunch or even just had to show up in general. One such person was nearby at Port Graham when he went off for work and he just never came back. This would put a strain on the small mining operation because when somebody goes missing like that and there's no evidence of to where they went, this kind of starts to freak people out a little bit. These disappearances would eventually cause the miners to try to abandon the operation entirely, which the town would then go on to plead for them to remain open by some accounts. Armed guards would have to be implemented to ensure the safety, but it would ultimately close down when the town was officially abandoned. The miners would not be the only ones contending with issues. Prior to the end of Andrew Kamluck, a man by the name of Albert Petka would actually end up meeting his end, but he was able to tell what happened before taking his final breath. He states that he was out with his dogs at the time that he ran into some large hairy creature. He didn't know what it was, but he would go on to say that it was definitely not a bear at all. His dogs would reportedly attack and scare off the creature, but not before Albert had received a blow to the chest that would break ribs and injure him to the point that he was able to tell this story, but he would succumb to his wounds shortly after. While these interactions continued, hunters and fishermen had reportedly, again gone missing from earlier, would be found, sometimes in creeks that ran through the hills. What was found was a fairly grisly sight. It was said that their limbs would be shredded and their torsos having brutal damage, while others were just completely dismembered. They would then be washed downstream further, and then some were even found in the lagoon, washed into that. This, however, appears to be more in line with the hunters that went missing over a period of time, and not some large group that got wrecked. It also should be noted that most people just went missing and were never seen again. The event that would actually cause the people to flee the town is something that appeared to literally be ripping people apart in the woods, which, while inconsistent with a human, doesn't mean that something else couldn't have been doing it, which I'll talk a little bit more about, like the natural reasons at the end of this. Luckily enough, there was a spotting that actually did not result in the mutilation of the person, and this man would go on to tell everyone what he saw. While down near the cannery, a man named Tom Larson saw a large hairy beast on the beach, which he said was walking on two legs at the time. He would run back to his home to get his equalizer and then return with the creature still there. It apparently looked at him and he at it in a standoff. It then turned and walked into the woods, leaving behind the fish wheels that were completely destroyed. Bro, take the shot. Are you kidding me? See, this is kind of what bugs me. You have something in the woods that is apparently shredding people to pulp, and you have it lined up. And you basically have, like, it to the point that you could end this whole issue, and you just let it walk off. Of course, shock can't be ruled out, but still. Another man who's a logger apparently had a run-in that could not be explained, but I'm going to explain it. And it is said that he was working on something when it looks like he got hit over the head with a piece of huge logging equipment. His name was Andrew Kamluck. Apparently, this was way too large for any one man to lift, so neither he nor someone else could have been able to lift it, nor, I guess, anyone working with them, and it would take several men to lift this piece of equipment. So he would have had several people wanting to take him out, and past that, there were way easier ways to end someone rather than using this specific piece of equipment. Then they found him, and there was blood on the equipment itself, indicating that it had been used in some capacity to result in this guy getting bodied, and he was found 10 feet away from it, so it's not like he could have slipped and fell and hit his head and then moved 10 feet. It looked like someone had picked it up and smashed it over his head. Shortly after this happened, I have no idea why hunters would still be going in and attempt to hunt in the woods, but I mean, I guess the reasoning here could be because how remote the town was. It's possible that they needed to hunt in order to actually eat. As you might imagine, it's a pretty good motivator. The hunters have been tracking a moose, which being in the southeast of the United States, we really don't have moose down here. But let me tell you about them real quick so you can get an idea of what they would have to do to bring this thing down. It is said that people that live in areas that are endemic with moose would rather meet a bear in the wilderness than a moose. The moose is the largest of the deer family. A male moose can actually stand up to 6 feet tall from hoof to shoulder, which is about 1.8 meters. On top of that, they can weigh upwards of 1,400 pounds or 635 kilograms. This thing has got an attitude to match that size as well. Moose are considered to be extremely ill-tempered, and if you happen to be near one, they will gore you and pretty much turn every bone into your body into a nice powder before walking away from you. These things, on the regular, fight bears. While still being the prey of bears in the area, there have been instances where a bull moose has outright killed an attacking bear with a well-placed kick or by using its antlers. They essentially stomp down on the bears as well, rake them with the hooves, causing internal injuries and hemorrhaging, as well as use antlers to spear the bear. Basically, a moose is just nothing to play with, especially since we're a lot smaller than them, and they can easily throw their weight around and turn you into a hashtag. While this group was tracking the moose, they eventually stumbled across an absolutely grisly battleground. Apparently, the area was covered in blood and fur. The moose had gotten into a confrontation with something in that area that the hunters came across a flattened spot where the moose must have been forced down. But what's more odd is there was no moose body to be found. Whatever it was had the strength to carry the moose away rather than just eating it there. Now, there are two things to know about the moose-bear relationship in terms of predation. Bear will typically choose younger moose to eat because they're less experienced and less likely to put up an effective fight. Also, the neck of a moose is relatively weak in terms of forces that would be enacted on it from, say, a bear paw swipe, which has resulted in things like decapitation or severing of the cervical spine if it lands just right. So it's actually fairly common for a bear, if it comes across a moose in the woods, it could take it out. But dragging it away, especially not in the general vicinity, is a little more difficult for a regular bear with the larger the moose gets. But what's even more odd is the tracks they found. These tracks did not appear to be bear tracks and actually resembled a human foot with plantigrade structuring that we have. Bears also have plantigrade structuring as well, but obviously, I don't need to explain that. A human footprint definitely is a unique shape compared to a bear track. The other thing that was noted about the footprint was the size. The foot was over 18 inches in length, and because it was human-like, there were no claw marks at the end of its toes. This is largely where the idea of a Sasquatch hunting the forest at this time comes from. See, this was bad enough to make people want to leave, right? I would have probably looked at this and been like, yeah, I'm good, I'm getting out of here. But these apparently were some pretty hardy people. They would continue to stick it out even after all these events took place, but every few years, more people, specifically hunters, would continue to go missing in those woods. And then some of them would show back up in pieces in streams and lagoons. Other strange things that would have been seen in the trees in the area was that they were pulled up from the ground and then shoved back in upside down. Over time, this did cause people to sort of like leave this cursed town and head towards nearby towns that didn't have people going missing on the reg, which was probably a good move. Those that chose to stay and continue working, however, didn't believe this, or they just believed it to be a large bear. But they would report that something else was happening. Like, yeah, this is actually like a threefer. This town was absolutely cursed. There were two other things going on that scared the absolute hell out of people, which people then believed was an actual haunting. Cliffs resided above the town a little ways off, and occasionally at night, a woman with a pale face could be seen moving through the cliffs. She wore a long black dress, so long actually that she had to carry it as she walked along. She would let out a wail before disappearing back into the cliffside itself. Nobody appears to have gone missing specifically because of this, but I imagine looking up at night and seeing a woman out there just wailing and then vanishing, probably a little alarming for those that remained. The third thing plaguing the area also might suggest there could have been an established population of something out there related to the bigger creature. These were apparently several smaller creatures running around hunting in a pack. These things were said to be on two legs as well and would run people down given the chance. But, what in the name of all that is holy is that? They were said to be covered in hair and basically referred to as little devils. Basically, make of that what you will. As time passed and more people kept missing, eventually everyone would have had enough of this. And by the way, the amount of people that went missing is like over 36. The town itself had 31 people. So it would show that like one guy, though, as the rest of the town like continued to flee, this guy had balls of steel. In the 1940s, after several Dall sheep hunters again went missing and their bodies were torn apart like many others in the stream, this seemed to be the final straw that broke the camel's back. Everyone would flee the town, never to return. However, the postmaster, or just the alpha Chad of the group, decided that he would stay in town for one more year, likely believing the people would return. He stated that a lot of strange things continue to happen in the town after its abandonment, and in 1951, he officially skipped town as well. The people that fled Portlock moved to the nearby native Alaskan villages of Nonwalk and Port Graham. The village of Nonwalk still maintains private ownership of Portlock today, and in recent years, apparently, they're thinking about reestablishing the Portlock village once again. Okay, well, good luck, guys. As of the 1990s, however, this town has officially dissolved according to the government due to nobody actually living there. To this day, you can still get out there, but you have to understand it is exceedingly remote, and you are truly on your own once you get out there. So as your lawyer, I'm required to advise you against it. So what could this thing actually be? Well, it's clear, like with most folktales and lore humanity comes up with, it could be a mixture of like actual truth, storytelling, and warnings. See, there were still younglings in this town because it was families as well as workers. Because of this, it's pretty clear that warnings about the forest would be commonplace. Telling your offspring to steer clear of a very real and very present danger such as moose, bears, wolves, snakes, and just the elements in general, considering that while the summer may be pretty mild, the winters are still pretty brutal there. So it would be quite advantageous for their survival if you warn them. These stories would be told to warn everybody, and then those would be passed around. Now, the thing about humans being social creatures is we tend to trust what others say. So as a result, when someone mentions a woman on a cliffside wailing at night, all it would take is for like a cougar or a mountain lion or some sort of screech out in the darkness for the minds of people to play tricks on them and make them think that they saw something that they really didn't. Add to this the concept of people actually going missing and being torn apart. There are very normal situations in which this can happen. If someone was stalking the forest, which given the remoteness of the town, really they could do very little about it besides round up a posse, but if any like person wanted to take out another, interference from law enforcement would be minimal, if even present at all. That may have just been like a hunting ground for someone who is taking out others who then enter the forest. After doing so, a bear happens upon the carcass and proceeds to tear apart the person. If they were dumped near a stream, they would end up further downstream. Other situations can be explained, such as with the man who got hit in the chest by something, and then he recounted what happened. The reality is this damage to the chest likely did a few things. If it compromised his lungs, which it sounded like it did, the brain would become starved of oxygen. When this happens, hallucinations can begin while alive as the brain tissue begins to die off. This can cause an issue that can present in two ways. Either a hemothorax, which will fill the pleural space between the ribs and lungs, putting pressure on the lungs to kind of fill up with blood, which causes the lungs to expand less and less, the more blood that gets in between those until eventually you can't even take a breath. Or it was a full pneumothorax, which happened, which allowed air to enter the rib cage, causing the lungs to collapse, preventing him from breathing. Either way, oxygen starvation was assured, and as a result, I would imagine he began to hallucinate and even possibly misremember what attacked him. It actually could have been a regular bear, but as his mind started to go, he began to explain it in bizarre ways, and that's actually incredibly common for people to do right before the end. The man who was apparently hit with a piece of logging equipment might have possibly even been explained in a way that, it was too heavy to lift, and he was 10 feet away from the equipment when his body was found. How could this have happened? Well, it's kind of important to remember that head injuries can do very weird things to your body. If he were to, say, fall and hit his head, what a lot of people don't realize is sometimes your body will, quite literally launch itself during a subsequent seizure. It's actually been seen in soccer that a soccer player was hit in the head, and they misattribute it saying that he was internally decapitated, but that's actually wrong. He got hit, went into a seizure, which caused him to leap up and actually backpedal for a few feet, as well as behave strangely. And when he covered a certain amount of distance, he then fell to the ground. And that's when everybody realized that what just happened. And that's why they misattributed it, because people aren't really sure what a seizure is. But he's still alive to this day. So that's the point. Sometimes you don't just hit your head and fall down and it's game over. Sometimes your body will continue to move due to signals it's getting from the brain. Personally, what I believe to have happened is he likely fell or tripped over a rock, hit his head hard enough to cause bleeding and the blood on the equipment, and had his muscles seized, causing him to be found a ways from the actual equipment, which may have seemed like an impossible distance, but it really wasn't. As for bringing down the moose and carrying it away as well as the tracks, I would like to bring something up. Alaska has a man-eater of a bear known as a polar bear. These bears are absolute behemoths. In fact, sometimes they say they can stand like 10 to 12 feet tall. I think I mentioned it in my last video, but essentially these types of bears, when they encounter man, well, they can pick you up, a literal full-grown man, by the chest and carry them away like a dog does to a puppy. They're notoriously difficult to bring down, and given like a quarter of a chance, they will rip you limb from limb. Polar bears are also unfortunately very curious of humans, and as a result, they are not afraid of the noises that we make, nor our intimidation tactics that might work on other bears. Remember, that's like an important saying: if it's black, fight back. If it's brown, lie down. If it's white, good night. This is likely due to the environment that they live in which prey isn't just going to come along every day. So when they find something, they need to take it out right then in order to eat. With all that said, though, this doesn't really match the description given by those in the area who saw the creature. They always said it was sort of like a brown, shaggy fur. Well, there is another type of bear as of late that we've actually seen mate with polar bears due to overlapping territories. In Alaska, another bear known as the Kodiak bear, and also brown bears that are in the area, they're quite plentiful. Sometimes these bears will actually run into polar bears and create young with a combination of two traits. This could very possibly result in a polar bear-sized brown bear that lacks the white hair. Bears also tend to stand up on their hind legs a lot, and you know what they're probably going to be attracted to? I'll give you a second. Fish wheels to get salmon. They also would not be opposed to eating humans as they carry the polar bear genes. To me, these creatures seem like they could just be possibly the offspring of a polar bear and a brown bear mating. The problem arose when something very natural started tearing people apart and carrying away moose. Then when the tracks were found, they thought it to be a human, but bear tracks actually look somewhat like human footprints as well. And if you're looking at an 18-inch, which this was 18 inches in length footprint, you're not going to think, oh my God, this is a bear track. You're going to be like, this is a giant human foot. So it's not too far-fetched when you realize, like, also the average polar bear foot can be 12 inches long with outliers being larger. And then take into consideration sometimes combining two species that can mate, such as like a lion and a tiger, that produces a subspecies that can be much larger than both parents. And also, they say 18 inches, but did they have like a ruler on them at that specific point in time? Like, how do they actually measure it? Because if you had a polar bear mixed with a Kodiak bear, you know, sometimes larger polar bears have had like 14, 15-inch feet. So you kind of start to see how this thing might have been able to carry off a moose on its own. So when people go missing, rumors and fear began to take hold of the people still residing in town. Once that happened, it was only fueled by, you know, weird but natural events taking place regarding some people not showing back up after they left for work, or someone hitting their head on logging equipment. However, I don't believe these people were wrong to flee the area. If there is a hybridized bear walking around and already had a taste for human flesh at this point, it's only a matter of time before it got brave enough to approach a human town. Potentially, I believe humanity should have done what we always do: organize a hunt for the creature, but approach it without the superstition and realize it for what it is, a really big animal. The extra things to me just kind of seem to be the consequences of being afraid. People talk and then people's minds begin to play tricks on them. The only thing that is known with certainty about this entire event is that the people of this town saw fit to abandon their livelihoods to seek safety elsewhere. And this means that they were in fact scared enough and took this as a real threat to themselves. Whether it was a large bear or something else to inspire that much fear means that something really was going on, whether the far-flung future people like us believe it or not. But I want to hear what you guys think, because let's...
All right, yo, that's gonna do it. Sorry, it was all discombobulated and drawn out. It didn't flow like I was supposed to tonight. My apologies. Now that story right there is a true story that it has absolute facts to back it up. That they all left and went on to other villages and completely abandoned Portlock. Whether it's because they were being attacked by a hybrid bear or a Bigfoot or a Yeti or whatever the hell you want to call this, whatever was getting them, they absolutely abandoned their village, the town, all but the postmaster till the very last year, and then he himself did too. And Portlock sits there abandoned as we speak, owned by two other towns. So that's what happened with that one. The others, nobody knows. Doveland is said to be a myth, possibly. Urkhammer is absolutely considered to be a myth. Doveland is known to have possibly existed, but nobody knows. And I don't know, you guys, but that's gonna do it. Like I said, sorry it was drawn out a bit and it was spread out. I was just trying to figure out a way to present it, and I didn't quite get there with it, so my apologies. Have a great night, Miss Bonnie. Get some sleep, dear. We love you. Lake Niles disaster. I've heard of that before. Oh, that's crazy. I will have to check that out, Angel. Thank you very much. All right, y'all. That should do it for tonight. Please join us tomorrow for the cold case and a coffee and a cold case. Mama Bear is going to be the lead channel we'll be leading from. So look for her. In fact, hold on here. Let me show you something here. It's already set and ready to go. Good Lord. This is going to irritate me tonight. There it is, guys. We are covering the Turpin family in the Houses of Horrors. Hope you're ready for that one. Quite a wild story, guys. So please check it out if you will. Be sure to pop on in there. It's set for, I think it's 10 or 10:15 maybe. 10:30 a.m. So we will be there live tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, covering the Turpin family cold case. So I am hoping to see you guys there tomorrow. Thank you guys. Have a great night. Thank you, anybody that supported the channel via donations. God bless. Thank you to my Blue crew. God bless. You guys did amazing as always. And thank you to all you meatballs. Much love to everybody. Thank you guys so very much. And we will see you very soon. Have a great night, folks. Bye-bye.